did you do our webinar today on budgeting?
I didn't have time to, but it looked very topical.
Great. Yeah, it was great. We had 200 people on Zoom, so it went really well, actually.
Wow. Congratulations.
Yeah. Alicia did it all. I just stayed out of the way.
Senator Sanborn, you've changed your name to Sean Babine?
Yeah.
He wishes.
That's so strange how that happened.
If you click on the 3 dots next to your name,
Yeah.
it'll let you rename it.
Or I
Shows
can
up
read
as Sean on mine.
Why don't we all be Sean Babine for the night?
That would be funny.
That's like a nightmare.
Wow. Some things never change.
No, I've used that line. I've used that line plenty on Zoom, so I'm just recycling that line. So it's nothing personal. I think we're missing 3 counselors. So I'm going to give 2 counselors, I guess. So I'm going to give it a couple more minutes. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and get started, and because I believe we're missing 1, but okay, I would like to call this workshop to order. I have shared on everybody's screen the agenda to give us a brief overview on the structure of the workshop. First and foremost, I want to welcome our guests today. There are plenty of them, and I will hopefully will introduce everybody as the agenda dictates. I think that'd be easiest simply because we're using the Zoom format. But if we're looking at the agenda, it's structured in such a way that some of the special guests that we have with us today, I have front loaded them simply so they can be dismissed at their, if they want to be, which I assume they will, they can be dismissed after we've asked questions and they've had their contribution. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to do a federal state overview for the members of the legislative delegation. So with us today are Representatives Chris Chiazzo, Sean Babine, and Senators Linda Sanborn and Rebecca Millett. So the 4 of you, thank you so much for your time. I know it is greatly appreciated. Before I hand it over to, I think Chris is going to do a brief overview for us, but just for everybody at home and to restate our purpose here, we're well aware that lots of answers right now are I don't know. And so we are simply, as we go through our budget process, that we have tried to buy ourselves some time to just get as much certainty as we can. But as we do that, we're acutely aware that that might be a very little amount of certainty. But as part of our due diligence and to get our arms and our brains around the greater economic picture, we invited you guys here today to hopefully just help us in our decision-making process. So with that, Chris, would you like to lead us off for your delegation?
I mean, I certainly can. It's entirely up to you guys. We can go through the list of received questions first, if you'd like, or we can just do a brief, I guess, synopsis of the governor's press conference today. I thought that was fairly telling.
Yeah, me too. Why don't we summarize the press conference, and then we'll hit you with probably some questions that you guys have already been forwarded.
Okay. And these were from my notes, and these are my takeaways. So I don't have anything official that was been released yet. Maybe one of the senators or Sean has something that was officially released. But basically, the governor announced.
Chris, I'm going to hop in just because the governor has issued a press release with a summary of everything that was mentioned today. So we can forward that to you, Paul, to share with your colleagues because it's all written out very nicely in the document.
Yep. Yeah, perfect. Thanks, Rebecca.
And I have that, and it's not the press release, it's the stuff that's on the governor's site. that just popped up right after her press release, and it's got all, anyway, I got stuff too.
Well, Chris, why don't you, for those that are watching, I think it's important that we summarize it now.
Yeah, actually, Rebecca, if you don't mind, I'll defer to you. I don't have that in front of me right now. So if you've got it right there and you want to walk through the high points, I'm happy to defer.
Oh, sure. Okay. You caught me off guard, but I'm at the ready. So I'm just going to go right to the meat of the press release, and it's about the plan to restart Maine's economy. Basically, she's got it outlined in a series of stages, and the first stage is May. That's stage 1, and I would say, it's a pretty cautious opening, but it does allow healthcare providers to prioritize care for patients with time-sensitive conditions. There is some expansion around barbershops, hair salons, and pet grooming. Limited drive-in, stay in your vehicle religious services, drive-in movie theaters, outdoor recreation, including guided outdoor activities of hunting and fishing, and then something interesting called restricted use of golf and disc golf courses, state parks and state-owned public lands and historic sites, although certain coastal state parks will remain closed, auto dealerships and car washes. And I should add that how all of this is going to look is going to result from conversations with the DECD and the business areas in terms of coming up with safe protocols that will meet the one of her goals, which is to continue to maintain public health. Stage 2 is June 2, which is beginning June 1st. And that is potentially raising the limit on gatherings from less than 10 people to less than 50 people. It will also call for people who can work from home to continue to do so, but allows for employees in certain fields to begin to re-enter the office as needed, including state employees. It maintains the 14-day quarantine for all people entering or returning to Maine, as it remains in stage 1. And the special precautions for older Mainers and others at risk of COVID-19. So with appropriate safety precautions, stage 2 would allow for some degree of opening with reservations, capacity limits, and other measures for restaurants, fitness and exercise centers and nail technicians, retail stores for broader in-store shopping, lodging and campgrounds for Maine residents and those who have met the 14-day quarantine requirement, day camps for Maine children and those who have met the 14-day quarantine requirement, and coastal state parks. Stage 3, which would be July and August, contemplates maintaining the prohibition on gatherings of more than 50 people and other stage 1 and stage 2 restrictions, including the 14-day quarantine on people entering Maine. With appropriate safety precautions, stage 3 would allow for some degree of opening of lodging, such as hotels, campgrounds, summer camps, or RV parks for Maine residents and visitors. The administration is developing guidelines to assist them in safely reopening, and reservations should not be taken until those guidelines are issued. Outdoor recreation, such as charter boats and boat excursions, bars, personal services such as spas, tattoo and piercing parlors, and massage facilities, among others. Stage 4, which is the final one, and the timeline is undetermined at this point, contemplates lifting restrictions and allowing all businesses and activities to resume with appropriate safety precautions. They make a point of saying that these stages above are advanced as a framework for planning. Innovations or expanded testing and other capacity could accelerate this pace, as could a determination that certain parts of Maine, such as rural areas, may be able to ease restrictions safely. The Mills administration does not currently anticipate that it will be safe to accept cruise or commercial passenger ships with more than 50 people this summer. And I just would say that, the governor makes a point also saying that this is the plan, but that this is always going to be evaluated against the public health data that Maine CDC will be tracking. And if things appear to be going well, maybe it can be advanced. But if there seems to be another trend line towards resurgence, they may start restricting again. But so that's as quickly as I could with the overview of what she rolled out today.
Thanks, Rebecca. Linda, did you have something to add? It looked like you had something to add.
I did. Sorry, I was just going to say that she mentions in the first stage, you can still only have 10 people gathered. And then that expands in stage 2 and 3 to less than 50 people gathered. So I just thought that was an important point to share. All of those stages had the 14-day quarantine for people from out of state, which is going to be really tricky to implement, I think, or to know who's following those guidelines. But I think that is important as well to know.
If I could add something, because of course my husband and I have been poring over this since it came out because of our businesses. You can't open anything, even if it's on the list, without going through deceased. Well, I call it deceased, the Department of Economic Development. And you have to do the checklist, and they're figuring out all this. It's almost like licensing. You got to get a badge, is what they were calling it, in order to even open. So it's not just you automatically can open up your hair salon or you whatever. You have to go through a process. So.
And is that checklist readily available, or
they're coming up. The only checklist they have available right now is for car dealerships. That's one they used for an example, but it's my understanding they'll have more of them tomorrow. And I've heard that hairstylists are, Paul, just in case, is one of the first ones they're going to have out. So that's my understanding.
Yeah.
Commissioner Johnson mentioned that it'll be an online application, I believe, where you'll be able to look at what your requirements are, and they're going to be specific to whatever industry you're relative to. So barbershops and hairdressers would be different than maybe tattoo parlors or car dealerships. So it'll be industry specific. I think you'll have a series of requirements to go through. I was a little unclear as to whether that was going to be on a, good faith method or how it was going to be enforced. It sounded to me like you would download the criteria. It would be assumed that you would be following that criteria. And if there were reports or indications that you weren't, then action would be taken. But I don't think there was any kind of letter of approval or anything required, unless somebody else heard something different.
That makes sense.
Well, I agree. That's what I heard is, you'll have this checklist of standards and you're kind of on good faith saying, we plan to follow this, and then you'll get your badge that you can put on social media or in your window or wherever appropriate to say that you are following those kind of guidelines.
Perfect. Dawn had a question, then after Dawn, I'll let Betsy. So Betsy, you can put your hand down. I see you. And then so let's go Dawn and then Betsy. Dawn, you're on mute. Try it again. I'm going to go Betsy first and then Dawn, because I don't think Dawn's audio is working. So Betsy.
Thanks, Jean Marie. That was really helpful. I haven't had a chance to go through these all the way other than what you read, very high level. But are you just considering the town, not you guys, but do you think the town is just considered like a business? I mean, we weren't really included. We have residents wanting to know when we're opening. I know Tom and staff are getting ready by putting barriers up, and we're getting ready to social distance with lines, all kinds of things. How does this timeline impact municipalities?
I would say that's a good question. They did not address that, and I'm not quite sure the answer.
Yeah, I would agree with Linda. I didn't hear anything specific on municipalities. I would assume, this is just an assumption on my part, you would look at it almost like a retail business where you would limit the number of people coming in and out of town hall visits, and then maintain some kind of social distancing or something in place, whether it's plastic barriers at the town clerk or something. I don't know if there's any protocol specifically for reopening a municipal.
Right,
So,
whether
I think-
phase 1 or phase 4 is a pretty big difference for
I
us.
think that if we follow what the governor has done previously, she's allowed for a lot of local control with regards to the municipalities and the school districts. So I would, at this point, I'm assuming that she's going to allow that decision to be made by each municipality.
Yeah.
If I could jump in, Eric, Maine Municipal, some town halls in the state are open. They never closed. So I think that's why she stayed away from that. We talked very quickly after the governor's press conference today, and at MMA, our office is closed, and we view it as stage 2 would be us, that we're looking at being closed, and no formal decision, but we're looking at being closed in May and opening up right around June 1.
Good job, thank you.
Yeah, I would agree. My quick read of it, I think stage 2 we fit pretty squarely in. I'd like to spend some more time to see if there are certain services we can offer and provide protection to staff and customers alike. And I'm somewhat hopeful we might be able to open earlier than that. That would be my intent at this point.
John, do you have something to add? John?
Yes, so I
I
wanted
don't know.
to,
Can you hear my audio? Can you hear me now? Yeah.
did you say Don or Sean?
I said Sean. I'm sorry. Sean first. And then
No,
we'll
that's
go
okay.
back
Can you,
That's okay.
you can hear my audio now?
to John. No.
Go ahead. I had a quick question, which is I don't know if my audio is working or not, but I was kind of curious about how these were drafted. Was this something that was done bespoke for Maine, or did we follow another state's example? Is there any, was there any idea of the origin of these, or was it some sort of template that we worked from to come up with this?
So my understanding from the governor's press conferences, including today and from last week, is that she's been in touch with a number of stakeholders and other elected officials. That she's been on conference calls with, or I should say Zoom calls with the governors across the United States, with the vice president, with the president, with businesses, and a myriad of other stakeholders. And what they're developing is in response to that. And they've also opened up a portal last week to take input from folks from around the state. And I think they already, by Friday, they had already had like 600 or more contact points with folks offering their opinions on how things should be rolled out. And I will just add that she is in pretty close contact with the governors of New Hampshire and Vermont, as we all fairly closely resemble each other. We are close in proximity, and so there's a lot of kind of sharing best practices with each other in that regard as well.
Yeah, and I guess I would add too, Don, that I would concur with everything that Senator
Great.
Millett
Thanks very
said.
much. Thank you.
Am I muted?
No, you're good. Go ahead.
Okay, sorry. The only thing I would add too is that, the governor mentioned in her press conference that he was very cognizant of the situation down in Massachusetts as well, and that helped draft the staging or the phases a little bit better to give us a little bit more flexibility with adaption, because one of the things I think she said she wanted to avoid was, let's say we open golf courses too soon, and they're not opened in Massachusetts or in other areas. We don't want to create that influx of people coming up here to get a day's worth of golf in, and didn't want to inspire. She didn't want to inspire that kind of response. So I don't know if there's any specific game plan that we're following, just like another state, to what Senator Millett had mentioned. But I think obviously she's looking at a regional approach, and they also explored potentially looking at regional or county-wide responses to opening certain things, depending on conversations with Commissioner Johnson at the DECD as well, to see if other counties could meet safety obligations faster than some others. I mean, clearly Cumberland and York are the two most impacted ones. So I don't know if that's going to really impact us all that much directly, but we could see, I think we could conceivably see different areas of the state doing different things based on their demographics and meeting the safety criteria first before, let's say, Scarborough does.
Thanks.
So we're getting quite a bit of feedback somewhere, so I'm going to just have everybody muted unless you're speaking. Sean, I know you had your hand raised, so Sean, go ahead.
Thank you. I just want if the other delegation can confirm, one part I just want mentioned is that the governor did stress our own responsibility, particularly around face masks, and that even though we are permitted, for less than 10 for the first month and less than 50 for the second, is that in those areas in which safe distancing can't be perfect, but might be compromises, that we are encouraged, if not requested, to continue wearing the face mask. And I think that needs to be stressed.
Yeah, thanks, Sean. Totally agree. Yeah. Are there any other questions, follow-up questions with the governor's release just now from anybody on the council? Okay, Chris, I know I've asked you a couple times, you want to hit some of the highlights with the questions that we sent and see if, and I understand that some of them might not be 100% addressable right now, so you could probably skip those, but any of the ones that had common themes, by all means, and perhaps we can ask follow-up questions on them. You're on mute there, Chris. Sorry. I muted everybody because of the feed.
Yep. Nope. Sorry about that. Let me grab those and open those up. Have those right here. Bear with me just for a quick second here. Getting there. All right. Do you want me to just go through the order, just the order that they came in?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. All right. So the first question was, are we aware of any federal help for states and local governments? There's been certainly been quite a few packages come through from the feds. I know one of the challenges that that's been going on with the federal money that we have received so far. I think we've received half of what our disbursement was through the I believe it was the CARES Act, but I'm not entirely sure which act it was. But we've received half of our allotment from the state level. The reason I think we are hesitant on dispensing those funds is because they are very restricted at the federal level in terms of what they can and can't be used for. So we're really, I think the national contingent is lobbying very hard, and the governors, I believe, are lobbying very hard as well to get some of those restrictions taken off so that we can use it, have a little bit more flexibility in how those funds are utilized. So I don't know where the status of that is. There's also talk of potentially something in the next round of relief being more targeted to smaller municipalities or smaller subsets, based on the fact that a large tranche of the first awards were geared towards much higher population centers, major cities and things like that. So I think it's still a work in progress. I think there's potential there for hopefully some adjustment, but that's really kind of at the federal level that we're waiting for. So I guess and these are just from what I'm hearing. I'm happy to open it up to the rest of the contingent as well if they've got other info or other ideas of what they're hearing.
Tom, do you have a question?
Paul, just a question. Eric, you might be able to answer it. It was my understanding that the CARES Act had something in the order of $1.2 billion to the state of Maine, 45% of which was potentially to be allocated to local governments. And I'm just curious if you've been involved from an advocacy point of view and what distribution method might they be considering?
I think that's right. I'm not sure, I'm not sure what the governor's position on that is, but to what Paul was saying earlier, I think, or Chris, there is that possibility of a fifth stimulus, and we're hoping through the National League of Cities, and I would encourage all of you, if you're interested, to contact a congressional delegation. That's the one that could directly go to municipalities your size, because right now that first stimulus bill was either to the state level for them to distribute as they think they should, or to municipalities of 500,000 or more population, which obviously doesn't help us much here in Maine. So I know the National League of Cities is working on that one, which is that controversial one that Majority Leader McConnell recently talked about, that would go straight to municipalities. That's the one I know NLC and MMA are focused on now, trying to make that happen. I'm not sure. I could check with Kate and get back to you tomorrow, Tom. I'm not sure what if the Mills administration has even given us a position on that yet, straight to municipalities. I can check with Kate on that tomorrow.
That would be great. And the presumption is they'll use one of the existing distribution methods, and there'll be winners and losers depending on which method they choose. So
Okay.
I'm quite curious, sir.
Okay.
Rebecca, did you have something to add to that? And then Betsy, you can ask a question.
Yeah, the legislature sent a letter to the congressional delegation about this specific point, in hopes of letting them know how important it's going to be for us, mostly not in this current fiscal year, but in the next fiscal year. And, you know, maybe that's something that your body might want to think about doing as well.
Thank you. Betsy?
So yeah, I just want to say that Kate did address this today, and that MMA budgeting in a crisis workshop, which just a pitch for folks, was outstanding, and it's going to be posted. She did address the actions that MMA is lobbying very clearly. She laid it out. They are going to also post the questions and answers, but I would highly recommend everyone watch it. It was very, very good. No one has all the answers right now, but the strategy, at least from my standpoint, that MMA laid out of what they're looking at, I thought sounded quite effective.
Great. Thank you. Linda?
Sorry, had to find that unmute button. I just wanted to clarify that the 1.25 million that we've gotten can only be related or be used for COVID related expenses, but not for all the lost revenue. And that's where the bind comes in, is that we know as of March that our revenues were not decreased, but we expect a big change for April and May. We don't know how big that's going to be in lost revenue, but unless we can get them to allow us some flexibility in using that for lost revenues, it's hard to find a good way to spend those monies. So that's what our letter to Congress was about, is that kind of flexibility for more than just COVID related expenses.
Great. Thank you very much. Any other questions on this specific topic? No? Chris, you want to take the next one?
Yeah, the next question was, has there been any data modeling done by DECD or others regarding state monies? The governor announced yesterday in her press report that she's going to convene two of the forecasting commissions. One is the Economic Forecasting Commission and the Revenue Forecast Committee. She's going to reconvene those early to try and get an assessment, and Senator Sanborn, being on appropriations, I'm sure would be able to talk to the importance of those important outcomes. And I'm not sure what the scheduling is for those and how they're going to take that and how that's going to relate to what the Appropriations Committee does with it. But I will certainly defer to Senator Sanborn.
Okay, thanks for that, Chris. And I think that what's important to know is that the legislature really did do a pretty good job of, we saw this pandemic coming. We were very cautious about spending. The proposed initial supplemental budget from the governor spent $126 or $7 million. And when we saw the pandemic upon us and decided to shut down early for everybody's safety, we spent around 75 million of that, but left 52 million in the balance that we had. And altogether, we have just shy, I think, of 200 million in a balance fund right now. Above and beyond that, we have the Medicaid stabilization fund. We had put 29 million into a fund thinking that if everyone who was eligible signed up for Medicaid, we may need more than what we had already appropriated. But we have not needed that 29 million. So we have that money. We have an increased amount of federal match that we're getting from Medicaid that we didn't expect to have. That will bring in about 40 million more of funds going back to, it's retroactive to January 1st of this year. So it's about 40 million each quarter that we're going to get from that. The rainy day fund, you know, we put about 50 million more into our rainy day fund so that we're now at 257 million in that fund. And what we know is that we have enough money to finish out the fiscal 2020 year without needing to dip into any of those funds. So that's all good news, I think. And I think we need to understand that side of the ledger too. Of course, what we don't know, again, is what all of those lost revenues now going forward are going to be. And that's the part that Chris alluded to, the importance of the consensus revenue forecasting commission and the revenue forecasting committee. And we're going to need those numbers to be able to plan what to do with the budget going forward. I would also say the highway fund, they do not have a positive balance. They're, I think, about 30 million in the hole, and there might need to be curtailments in the highway fund. The bonding that we have proposed for DOT, or that will come to the voters, the bonds that have already been passed will go forward in June. So there will be money to be able to do a lot of road construction and what have you from the bonds that we've already passed. So that is not going to be held up. So I guess those are a few points that might help people to understand where we're at.
Dawn has a question, and excuse me, Peter, then Dawn, then Betsy. Sorry, guys. Yep, Peter first.
Yeah, I think my question was, and I can't remember if it was Rebecca that brought it up, but you know, as we enter our budget cycle right now, I heard a comment saying this year may be less of an issue. A bigger unknown might be the consequences to next year's budget. And I'd like to elaborate a little bit on that. If you could give us any type of guidance or insight, because you know the question has been asked for us as we look at the budget: is this just a 1 year tightening the belt, or do we really need to be thinking this may be a pretty rocky 2-year cycle? So any guidance you could give us about what we should be considering for next year's budget for some of the things that we're thinking about this year? I don't know who made the comment, but it sounded like next year might be a tougher ride for us as far as revenue sharing and other things.
Well, I'll start. That is what I was saying for sure. You know, again, almost no state revenue is untouched in this, right? I mean, income taxes and sales taxes and fuel taxes, just about everything is going to be down. And so state income is going to be markedly reduced. So it's hard to know exactly what the extent of that is going to be. But definitely 2021 and going forward is going to be much, much tougher. You know, I know people have asked about revenue sharing, and, you know, we bumped that up to 3.8 from the 2 or 2.5 that it started with. And we're so happy to be able to do that in the legislature. And now, you know, I don't think that anyone can guarantee that that won't be touched. We're We're hoping that it wouldn't. I would say many of us in the legislature feel that that's a real top priority, that we continue to fund that to the highest extent that we can. But it's also hard to say that it won't be touched.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, do you have any sense, like Moody's projected that Maine might be out $1 billion by the time this all winds down in the next year. How will the state go about recovering? Will it be a multi-year recovery, or are they going to have to find that all in next year's budget cycle?
So I'm just going to pop in and just say, you know, I think Senator Sanborn has referenced the fact that the consensus forecasting committee is coming together many months earlier than normal for July, and we really aren't in a position to talk specifically about how we're going to approach this. We all know intuitively that things are not great, that we've just gone through a really tough situation. That's why we reached out to the congressional delegation, conveying the absolute necessities for more flexibility of federal funding to help us fill in some of these revenue gaps. In addition to that, the speaker, the president, and the two education chairs, myself and Representative Cornfield, sent another letter specifically about education funding, saying, you know, we're really going to need the feds to step up on that aspect as well. But how much of that gets translated into whatever this next stimulus bill, that's again why I would really encourage you all to think about crafting your own communication to Senator King, Senator Collins, and Representative Pingree to stress how essential it is to have much more flexibility than what we've been given in these first rounds. Without it, we'll be in a tough shape. But again, I want to reiterate what Senator Sanborn said around how much money we have saved. So, you know, if it is $1 billion, we've got roughly 500 million that we could potentially access. So it wouldn't take care of everything, but there's a wide range of possibilities. I know that for those folks who remained employed and are working from home, from my experience in our communities, they're doing what they can to continue to engage in economic activity where they can safely, by supporting local restaurants and our grocery stores and all of that. But obviously we have a long way to dig ourselves out of.
Sean, want to add to that, and then Dawn ask you a question, and then Betsy?
Yeah, quick follow-up. Mine has to do with, still on economic themes, but it has to do with the tremendous ambiguity that we're dealing with and the lag in information. There tends to be optimists and pessimists. And I know we take turns circulating articles that paint dire and brighter pictures both. But, I'm concerned that we're just sort of at the bottom of the food chain here, where we're late in getting real data. There's a delay in state economic data. You mentioned the commissions, the 2 commissions that the governor has created, which is terrific, but they're not going to be reporting out until late in the year. Is there anything you can suggest to us in terms of where to look or what we might expect in terms of any kind of flash reports or early looks or preliminary reports that could help us in our decision making at a local level?
It looks like Chris could respond to that. Chris, did you have some response?
Yeah, I had the privilege or the curse, I guess, of sitting in your seat. So I know you're in a real tough bind. I would just be really cautious right now. We don't know really what's going on the federal level either. So I think probably the worst thing we could do, certainly at the state level and possibly at the municipal level too, is to react to some of the things that we're seeing in the press and things like that. We're not alone in this. It's not a Scarborough problem. It's not even a Maine problem. It's a national problem. So I think we're in a different setting, in an unprecedented setting, in that there will have to be some solution on the federal level in combination with solutions to the state levels in which again is, and unfortunately will end up trickling down to the municipal level. But I mean, all I can tell you is that I know, I mean, I can't speak for everybody, but I think I can fairly say for everybody, we are going to make sure that the municipalities are a priority of ours in Augusta. We've all been through the situations with nobody wants to see property taxes going up. If we can at all avoid that, I think we'll be, we've taken, to Senator Sanborn's point, we've taken probably as prudent steps as we can as a state, not knowing really what to react to, but trying to plan ahead of time to put us in the best position to give us the best flexibility. And I think we just need to, we probably need to keep the communication channels open between your group and what we're doing at the state level, because as you can see, even today, the landscape changed and tomorrow could be different as well. So I don't think there's I don't think we have we certainly don't have the ability to develop a long-term solution to what's going on right now, because we're still in the middle of it. We're still kind of reacting to what's happening. So I know it's an uncomfortable position, especially when we have budget deadlines and we have to, you have to present budgets to the community, and we need, especially at the local level, they need to be voted on and approved. I guess I would just caution on being either too optimistic or too pessimistic, and no one can really read the tea leaves well. Just do the best we can with the information that we have. Stay in communication with us. I mean, if you have questions, what's happening and when it's happening, use us as the resource that we can be for you guys. It may not be, it will be the best information that we have at the time. It might not be everything that you need to make all the firm decisions, but if we have the information, you'll have the information, I guess is probably the best thing I could say.
Thank you.
Did you want to add to that, or is your moment passed? And then Betsy's question, I promise. Yeah.
Me?
Yeah. Did you want to add, Sean?
Yeah, I
Did
did.
you want to add that?
So I think Peter's question is the one we're hearing about the most at MMA. What do municipalities do now, and what do we do next budget year? And the sense we're getting is that a lot of municipalities like Scarborough are saying, let's be cautious right now, but let's not overreact. So maybe this isn't the time, if you had, and I'm not saying you did, 7 new positions and a whole new project that you were going to open up. Maybe we hold off on that till we see what the next fiscal year brings. On the other hand, some members are saying, well, should we cut 10 or 20% in anticipation of the next couple of years? And maybe that's overreacting at the same time, because we don't know what the stimulus is going to find out. We don't know, for instance, the governor's opening up car sales this weekend, and that's a big chunk of the sales tax, as you guys know. So I think that what I'm hearing, and I think what Kate was saying and Sue Pilgrim in our legal department is a general sense of approaching these imminent deadlines for you guys with caution, not sticking your necks out too far in the next fiscal year, but also not overreacting. And then in terms of the 1 or 2 year, how long is this downturn going to last? That is anybody's guess. And interestingly, on that Zoom budgeting webinar we had today, which was our first one, 200 people paid attention to that. We had difference of opinion. We had one city manager saying he thought it was going to be a 1 year deal. And we had another town manager saying he thought it could be 2 or 3 years based on his, and both of these guys have been, Tom knows them both, they've been in their positions for decades. So it's hard to guess there. It could be either one. It just depends on how quickly I think maybe people's psyches come out of this in the next fiscal year. I thought that might help. That's essentially the number one question we're hearing right now financially. What do we do now? What do we do next year?
Betsy, thank you for your patience. Mr. Babine, and then Ms. Gleistein.
Thanks.
I'm sorry. It's my turn, right?
No, Sean was trying to add to a conversation. He was trying to add to a response. That's all. So.
Thanks. Actually, there's a couple. One is that I also think that Senator Sanborn's comments around particularly the revenue side and the focus is perfect. But I think there also needs to be mentioned that like any business or even any municipality, you also have to look at the expense side. And the governor, if I understand correctly, has frozen spending for non-essential or non-emergency items as well as hiring. So, it's that balanced look at your entire financial picture that the state is taking that I think any community should also take. And we've done that in the past. And I think Eric actually hit on it perfectly on how everyone needs to react to this, because even though you might have forecasts that go out, some say 1 year, maybe 2, you also have to keep in mind the recovery period after that. So you might react to the situation for 1 or 2 years, but then you'll have another whole year. Well, I mean, like Chris said, having sat or being cursed, having sat with you, 2014 took us 3 years to recover from the 13-14 cycle when we had major cutbacks. So at the local level, that is. So, you have a very big challenge ahead of you. And the fact is data is always backwards looking. It's never forward looking. And it takes time to collect that, verify it, and then publish it. So unfortunately, I don't think we'll ever be in a position at the state level, even at the local level, to be able to provide forward-looking data that will make a budgeting process perfect. That's the challenge of what we have to do, right?
Betsy? Thank you, Sean. Betsy?
Right, yeah. I wasn't planning on pinging off Eric, but since he was before me, I will definitely say that workshop today was a huge help. People should watch it. Something very practical. They're talking about probably reducing their excise tax estimates, these two particular managers, anywhere from 8 to 12%. So there was really some specific tips in there. And they showed the whole analysis of what they've done, the charts and everything else of what they're looking at, very specific information. But I really wanted to piggyback off what Don said. And I did have a concern or a question. I know the governor is convening that economic council in July and August, which means to me, there's probably not going to be any report out from them until September. But I wondered what kind of data and information you get on a regular basis. And if you don't get things on a regular basis, I mean, like when can we get April income tax? And when can we get April, sales tax information? The more specific data that we could get, nobody can tell the future. We don't know the solutions. We don't know what the federal government's going to do, but the more specific data points that we can get, the quicker. So say what month end, do you get those? And if not, will you push for those to get as much specific data as possible? The governor, has done a good job. I don't think the data and the information and the transparency has been there as much as I personally would like to see. And I think we do that too, as a town council too. On our side, it's not easy to get information and communication out. I totally understand that. So it's not a criticism, but will you push for getting month-end data? Will you push for these numbers? If there is sales data that comes in from cars, in May, can we get that data?
Linda, do you want to respond to that?
Yeah, that is done on a monthly basis and has been for as long as I know, so that you can always get the revenue report of what happened each month by going online. It's the office of, I don't know what's OFPR, guys. But you can always resource that. So as I said, we had the March data that showed 4 million less of income, and it breaks it down into all the different types of sales and what money came in and how it varied from previous months, or they'll compare March of 2020 to March of 2019. So there's a wealth of information there if you just go to the government.
It sounds like you got that pretty quickly then. You had that sometime in April. It sounds like you had that sometime in April. It sounds like you got it pretty quickly.
That's right. So April's numbers will be before, I think, the 15th of May, we'll have those
Thank
numbers.
you. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Betsy. Sean, and then Karen Martin.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention the website is actually legislature.maine.gov/OFPR, which is the Office of Fiscal and Program Review. And there's a section regarding fiscal information that's in a left queue, as well as other information regarding taxation and so forth. So it is available out there. It doesn't provide me with a specific month ending. I'd have to go into each of the reports, but there's plenty of reporting out there.
Hey, Sean, can you just email me that link right now, and then I'll just.
Absolutely.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you. Karen?
Just wanted to point out, the statewide data is often available fairly quickly. It's getting it down to the town level that sometimes takes a little bit longer, but retail sales is relatively quick in terms of that turnaround time. Again, just a little bit lag time between when the state gets the totals versus when it gets broken down to the state, to the towns.
Great, thank you. Chris, are there any other highlights in the questions that we sent you?
Well, let me see. I think we've answered these, but I'll pose them anyway because you took the time to send them in. So what is the read, and what are they doing to make sure Scarborough gets their fair share of any additional funding from the state and federal level?
I think we've discussed
I
that.
think we've covered that. Yep. Next question, what is their read on the likely plan for which the state will recover the estimated $1 billion it will spend to support CNI? I think we've covered that. Impact the next two budgets. I think we've, I'll read the questions if you want for the record. But I think we've covered that. It's up to you.
No, that's fine. I like the way you're doing it. Yep. We don't need to be fine with it. Yep. So.
Oh, okay. Third one is, what are the governor's plans to reopen Maine for business? We've addressed that. She spoke for that today. Statewide draft, we addressed that as well. What is the plan for reopening healthcare, dental care, eye care, behavioral health care, surgeries, procedures, diagnostic testing, and treatments? It's a lot. I guess I'll just speak to that. I think for the first point, I think in part of the governor's conference today and her announcement to open up, I believe that she has said elective surgeries and some other procedures are going to be authorized in the next in the first phase. I believe I'm aware that York Hospital, I know, is scheduling some elected procedures starting on May 1st as well. So I think it comes down to a facility by facility decision based on their ability to manage their PPE, to make sure that they can keep the distancing and make sure patient safety is important. I will also defer to Dr. Sanborn to see if there's another approach, or if there's something that I missed in that as well.
No, I think you did a good summary. I think it's left up a lot to the healthcare providers, asking them to prioritize patients with time-sensitive conditions. So I don't think they're going to specify exactly, you can have your hip replacement surgery done this month. I think the healthcare provider needs to decide how urgent it is, and as you said, kind of make sure that they're providing the services in a safe way, that they're not overusing all of the personal protective equipment, and that we have plenty of hospital beds open should we take a turn for the worse, that we can kind of regroup. So again, I think it's hard to break it down and as to exactly which procedures can be done when, but it's a judgment call.
If I could just add to that, town councilors, while we've been talking, I did quick scans and sent out the paperwork that I have from the governor's site. And she specifically mentions healthcare under stage 1. So that's that May 1st. So, and then Linda did a really good job of explaining. So.
And is that dental care too?
It says healthcare for Maine licensed providers. So my assumption is that would include dental, but I should never assume.
No, that's absolutely included.
Okay, thank you.
So since we're sneaking up on the halfway mark of the workshop, so before I relieve the state delegation, is there any questions that have popped into anybody's mind that we haven't addressed today? Okay, Mr. Bavon and then Mr. Cazzo, and then Betsy.
Yes, so I actually have a question for maybe Mr. Hall, and that is that with this information from the governor and her stage plan, will the town be making a any changes or any future announcement regarding the primary election process? I know that there was a post on the website regarding how you can call in and mail in and request an absentee ballot. Will you be looking at that process and making an announcement of any changes in the future, or at least any continuation with announcements?
Well, we certainly take our lead on elections from the state. So we're looking very carefully and following their lead. I can tell you we are having unprecedented amount of requests for absentee ballots and filling those requests as they come in. I think that certainly is a indication of how the sentiment among voters at this point. But at this point, we don't have those answers, Representative. We're as anxious as you are. We have made plans with our school department to host the election at the high school in the auditorium at the gymnasium as we normally do. But we're ready to pivot should that guidance come down.
But behind questions around unemployment of all types of unemployment, the number 2 most asked question is about the absentee process in the elections. What I'm hearing.
Councilor Gleisteen, did you have a question?
Yes, I did. I had a question about the funds for the self-employed and those that work in the gig economy. Do you have any updates on when those folks could start seeing money?
Representative Chiazzo?
Yes, actually, that was going to be my question. That was a question that had come in on the main list. So I thought there was a really good announcement that came out today. It says unemployment eligibility will expand as of May 1st. Benefits for previously uncovered workers, self-employed workers, farmers and fishermen, independent contractors, and gig economy workers should apply online at reemploy.maine.gov. That's reemployme.maine.gov.
Can I add something to that, Chris, if you don't mind? Oh, can you hear
Go
me?
ahead, Tom. Yep,
Yeah,
go ahead.
Yeah. No, well, I mean, as I think we all hear from our constituents, and I'm hearing from everybody that's a friend in the state of Maine. So that think that somehow we have more information in advance of anybody else. But I think it's really important to stress with viewers is that, there's a level of urgency and uncertainty. And I believe the announcement today also said that some of the requirements are still being hashed out and worked out. So there isn't going to be that immediacy that everyone is used to in life where they might get a check within a week. It might actually take a little longer than that. So keep in mind that as we wait in long lines on the telephone or I heard 30,000 claims that are currently under review just under the existing program, let alone under this future change. So it's going to be a very long process and we all need to be patient because they're doing their very best at DOL.
Councilor Clucci?
Yeah, so I just wanted to, while the delegation's still here, circle back to Tom's question at the beginning about the distribution of the 1.25 billion that was allocated for Maine, and a portion of which was expected to flow down to municipalities. And I didn't hear that there was any advocacy from the delegation to support the governor distributing those funds to municipalities. What I heard was that we're advocating for rules from the federal government to be able to spend those monies more discretionary. So I just wanted to reiterate, I think from a local perspective, it's important that some of those funds do flow down to help with costs associated with COVID-19. So I just wanted to make that point.
Thank you, sir. Councilor Gleisteen, and then Senator Sanborn.
Yeah, to Sean's point. So do you have suggestions or does anyone in the delegation have suggestions, or is this something we should be looking at the local level for people who can't wait? I mean, we're talking, this is, if you were self-employed and your work went way down, you're coming up on 6 weeks. So is there suggestions for what these folks need to do? I'm sure you guys are pressuring the Department of Labor, get these things processed, get people in, process them by paper, do whatever we need to do. I'm sure that pressure is happening, but do you have specific suggestions for what people should do if they are out of money and they are not getting a check?
Oh, sorry, Representative Babine. I'm sorry.
There's so many, Betsy, that's a great question because, if we had that answer 8 weeks ago, it would have been a lot better because we wouldn't be so far behind. There's so many variables in the sense that who knows where everybody is and everybody's at a different stage, whether they're using savings or whatever it might be. But I've always said being a banker is always go and talk to someone with a financial institution and sit down and see what they might be able to offer based on your current financial portfolio of what you might have. Everybody has something different, as well as there's a lot of people who don't have a whole lot. So those who don't have a whole lot, my best advice is get into the system and get into the queue as quickly as possible and keep dialing and waiting. My understanding, by the way, and I actually, even though I don't need to apply, luckily, I did try to go on to the phone and dial in, and it literally it rings once and then hangs up. And what I've been told from staffers that I've talked to is that you just need to keep trying. And as soon as you get music, stay in the queue. And sometimes it might be a half an hour. I've heard of an hour, almost 2 hours for some people. But it's that due diligence or that diligence and being patient, because it's going to take time. I know it's very, very difficult, in that process. But that's all that we can do at the moment. I did want to go back, if you don't mind, Paul. I want to go back and address Councilor Cloutier's comment about the advocacy piece. And that is that I hope that if anything, this particular legislative delegation, all 6 of us, and I know Andrew McLean is often forgotten, but he's an important part of our delegation as well, that covers District 27, on the outer part of Scarborough. And that is that we will always advocate for Scarborough. And if you truly look at some of the progress that has been made over the last 2 years, we've been doing that all along, especially around revenue sharing, educational funding. That's a determined formula, but it is about the total value of money going into the system as much as what's coming out for us, as well as other factors. And we're always looking at how we can advocate stronger for Scarborough and the communities we represent. Because I know that our senators also represent other communities, and they fight for them too. We will always fight for Scarborough.
Thank you, sir. Senator Millett.
Yeah, I'm going to jump back to the expansion of the unemployment insurance program. One thing that folks can do is go online and get all of their documentation ready, because that will be really important to make sure that they have everything that they could possibly be required to have. And this whole delegation, I know, as I have been fielding phone calls, emails, texts, Facebook messages from citizens who are really struggling, and we've been doing our best to help them navigate not only the unemployment insurance system, but also the paycheck protection loan and the emergency disaster loan from the feds. And what I was very encouraged to see is that the Department of Labor recognizes our role as being integral to helping constituents. And so we are going to be provided with some training to get a much more in-depth understanding of what these sole proprietors, self-employed individuals will need to do in order to qualify. It's the Department of Labor's contention that getting the applications incorrect is what's really waylaying a lot of people. So it's their desire to make sure that there are as many people out there who are trained well to do that. And I would ask Tom and you folks to think about what Scarborough might be able to do to beef up not just the legislative delegation, but maybe some staff resources that can get trained to help constituents as well. Because I think it's going to take all of us. There are a lot of people out there who've been waiting for this. And come May 1, they are going to want to be in that queue, and they're going to want to be in that queue accurately.
Thank you very much. I think with that, I think I'm going to dismiss the delegation. So with our great thanks, Representative Chiazzo, Babine, Senators Sanborn and Millett, we really appreciate your time. When we sent out the invitation, I was hoping one of you would show up. So the fact that all 4 of you show up, I think speaks volumes to your dedication. So we do appreciate it. And thank you for indulging us today. So
Thank you.
I'm assuming you don't want to
Thank
hang
you.
out in the second half.
Thank you very much.
Stay in touch.
Thanks for having
Now,
us.
I would again just reiterate, keep in touch with us, because things change all the time. So we are neighbors.
Yeah.
So, we're real close. If you guys need help, just keep in touch with us and let us know. We'll do our best to help.
Thank
Awesome.
you.
Thanks, guys.
Good night, everyone.
Thank you.
So before I let Mr. Conrad go, Eric is with the Maine Municipal Association. I think Betsy's alluded a couple times to the workshop they had today of the budgeting, which seems like is very fruitful. I think I'm just going to open up some questions to Eric, pretty much on the spot. So we'll put you on the spot, Eric. I have one personally. I think, and Tom, feel free to correct me, but I believe we're budgeting for $1.7 million or just south of $1.7 million in revenue sharing for fiscal year 21. Which obviously is, I would suggest, right, questionable or in danger or, or deserves some scrutiny. So, Eric, is it something that the MMA would officially take a stance on, like a recommendation of a 20% decrease on that forecasting or a 30% decrease? Or could you maybe help us with that estimation right now?
Yeah, so our official position, and if the delegation, if your legislative delegation was still on the line, it would have been fine for them to hear this, is that they should honor the request that they've already made. And a couple of them said that that's what they want to do.
Yeah.
So right now it's at 3% of all state and sales income tax and revenue. And I think it's a safe bet that that's going to be lower than it was a couple of months ago, but it's supposed to go to 3.75%, which is a big jump on July 1. So our official position with the legislature is it's the easiest thing in the world for the state to say, we got to export some of our problem to towns and cities and to local property taxpayers the way not long ago, that's what happened every year. That's our official position. What I'm hearing is, and this isn't anything we would recommend that you do from a budget viewpoint, because it could be different in Portland and Scarborough than it is in Carthage and Eastport, but what I'm hearing is some people in my town, I live in the town of Winthrop. And by the way, I used to live in Cape Elizabeth for 10 years and I went to Romeo's Pizza on US 1 all the time with my kids. So I know your area well, but our town is budgeting 3% next year, even though it's supposed to go to 3.75. That's what this town's doing. That's the kind of cautious approach that I alluded to earlier, that a lot of our members are saying, look, the sky might not be falling, but it's a year to be careful. So that's what this town's doing. I think I've heard from other towns, and I know we have it, they're taking a similar approach. But officially, MMA's position to the legislature and the governor is that they should honor their 3.75 commitment, because it's still not 5% like statutorily for a long time it was supposed to be, and it should have been.
Sure, absolutely. Thank you, sir. Are there any, that was very helpful.
Okay.
Any questions? Tom, do you want to respond?
Yeah, I've been talking to a lot of my colleagues and no one has the crystal ball. The consensus seems to be lowering the estimate, and that's the 3.75 estimate by 20%. And so that's something that I've been working with right now, and I think that's something I'm going to move forward with. This is one of those items that is a watch item. I don't think we need to rush to make that final decision, but as we have budget discussions, I think we need to perhaps make an adjustment and then continue to watch and make a final adjustment perhaps when we know more.
Yeah, and just to add to that, Don and I last week, we attended a GP COG meeting of chairs and vice chairs, and it was actually a great turnout. It was 19 people. I think it was roughly 10 towns. The general consensus amongst the chairs and the vice chairs there, it was anywhere from holding it steady instead of, so I guess steady would be 3%, correct? And then I believe the town of Gray just reduced it by 30%. I think 30% on the 3.75%, which roughly brings you in the same spot. Yeah. But yes, I think what Tom said matches pretty well with the other chairs and vice chairs we heard at the meeting. Betsy?
Yeah, so today it was pretty interesting because the analysis that was done by Biddeford and Brunswick was twofold. Of course, excise tax is a huge thing, and they had a pretty extensive analysis of how they did that. But they also looked historically at excise tax as well as at state revenue sharing and what happened with each dip, like in 1990, 2001, 2008, and what the economic conditions were and what the dips were. So that was pretty interesting data, but they pointed out that at any one time, the state has pulled back the homestead. Nobody's thinking they will, but by the Constitution, they only owe us 50% of the homestead. They've also have pulled back a school payment under Governor Baldacci. There was one whole school payment that they didn't do, that they left out. Of course, we're sitting here talking about revenue sharing. They framed that pretty well. And then there's excise tax and a couple of other interesting areas they came up with. They were looking at ambulance revenue. We probably have some ambulance revenue that's down right now. If everything gets going again, we would presume that wouldn't. So there was a lot of different areas. Oh, and roads, the money for roads. It was kind of ironic because they said they're getting some decent bids for large capital projects, but do you want to really take on a large capital project? And then especially if you can't count on the road money. So there was a good roadmap there. And I think Eric kind of described it, which is, whether or not we consider this a bridge year or a longer term, that might inform some of the decisions that we make. There was a difference of opinion on that. And I think there's a difference on our council, but I like the way that was framed as is this a bridge year? We just need to get through 2021. And then we think pretty much we're going to bounce back. Or do we really think that we need to kind of start cutting because we're going to be at a lower level at 2021, 2022, 2023, and increased spending levels that they were also considering were increased social services, increased general assistance, and then anything that we might want to do for our residents and for our businesses as they open back up. Is there revenue that we're going to want to set aside to help them? So there were a lot of really thoughtful, a lot of thought process that's going in for every single town. I think the one thing they emphasize is this is not a normal year. This is absolutely not a normal year. Municipal budgets go kind of on automatic pilot in a way a little bit, but not this year. I'm sure Tom can attest to, and all of his colleagues, they're thinking through every single assumption, every single situation. So, I think there's more to the revenue picture than just the revenue sharing. And I think they described it quite well.
If I can jump in, Paul, I know from our advocacy staff too, the homestead exemption issue, that was a nice win for us in the last session too. And we're going to approach that the same way we're approaching the revenue sharing one, which was you made an important statement about helping property taxpayers and not putting more of the percentage burden, how much we collect from property taxes around the state. To addressing that in the last session, do not back up now, even though you could. So we're going to approach that sort of in the same honor commitment that we're going to approach revenue sharing. The one thing I talked to Kate Dufour before I came here today, and she wanted me to tell you guys that it's from our view, it's a very different relationship with this administration and this legislature, but definitely this administration than we had with the last one. That might surprise no one. But for instance, tomorrow, our executive director, Steve Gove, and Kate are on a conference call with Hannah Pingree, who is essentially Governor Mills's right-hand person on a lot of this stuff. We have a conference call with her and some cabinet members every single week. So we feel like for the first time in quite some time, maybe 10 or 20 years, they view us as partners, not as nuisances or a special interest group. And that means they view you that way too. And it's just, Kate wanted me to make sure you guys knew that. What that means is if you, Scarborough or any municipality, wants to give us feedback for one of these meetings, hey, can you ask this question? We have a concern about this specific thing that might even be unique to your town. We have an opening to ask those questions with this administration, especially right now. And we'd love to hear that from you guys. It's just an important point in terms of tone and cooperation that, again, we didn't get in recent years.
Thank you. Are there any other questions for Eric?
I did want to jump in on one thing. I wrote a couple notes as your delegation was talking there too. The elections issue, absentee ballots and stuff like that Tom referenced, we're expecting an executive order on that. We've been pushing for that for a couple of weeks. Our legal staff has been involved, maybe not as much as they wish they could see it ahead of time, but we're expecting an executive order to clear that up anytime now. And I know that's going to be one of the top 2 priority items that get discussed tomorrow, as well as I think whether there's going to be any kind of fluidity on property tax deadlines. Those are the 2 issues that we're pushing on right now. We expect to get an answer on that, executive orders on that. I would say within a week to 10 days. We were hoping we'd get it by now, but we haven't. So that should address this one. And then, I wanted to agree, there is the possibility of skipped school payments and things like that. We're hoping that we don't get to that next year, but that has happened historically, I think once.
Thank you, sir. Well, Eric, like the delegation, we really appreciate your time. I know this is time out of your day and this is very helpful. So thank you for
My
coming. by.
pleasure. And, MMA is the kind of, first of all, we value your membership. You're a great municipality, one of the biggest ones to have in. MMA is the kind of group that the more you ask of us, the more you get out of us. So we're there to be asked and to do favors, and not favors, to do what you need us to do. And please feel free to do that.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank
very
you, Eric.
Thanks, Eric.
Quick temperature. Would anybody like a 2 to 4 minute break before we proceed to the more Scarborough specifics? I'm getting some affirmatives. So sorry, Karen. So we're going to reconvene at, let's say 7:20. Does that sound good? Everybody take 5 minutes, relax, and we'll be back in 5 minutes.
Hey, Karen.
Hi.
I wonder, in the interest of time, I don't want to suggest, well, just be mindful of the time.
You got it.
Karen, I'm going to just, sorry, Karen, I'll just make you the co-host. Do you want to just do that and just have you share the screen? It's probably
Yes,
easier.
thank you. And while you're doing that, did want to point out two things from the conversation before. In terms of residents or folks from the gig economy, there is a FAME loan program that is targeted to consumers, and it's right on their COVID-19 page. I think we have it on the SEDCO website, but that is an instrument that is available. And the other thing I just want to make sure we say is, if you are in the self-employed category, you want to wait till Friday, which is when that program is going to be available. If you apply before that, your application is going to get rejected. So I just want to make sure everybody's got their timing right on those 2 points.
Okay, with that, I'll officially reconvene us. Next on the agenda is Karen Martin, who's the Executive Director of the Scarborough Economic Development Corporation. I've invited her to perhaps give us she's a little more, she's close to the ground and she gets things in real time. She has direct contact with business owners. Side note, since the hair salon lift was just announced, I've had 37 missed phone calls on my cell phone, which is, so that's good news, right? But with that, Karen, why don't you take it away and give us some introduction, and we'll pepper you with questions. And actually, you have a presentation, correct?
I do, just some slides. So I'm not getting, let's see, who can start sharing? It still says who can start sharing, only host. Let's see, let's do that.
The host probably is the only one who can share.
Yeah, I made her co-host.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
Oh, right. There you go. Okay. Start sharing. And hold on just a moment. Okay, let's get.
Now it looks good on our end, Karen.
Oh, it does? Okay, because right in the middle is advanced sharing options. It's just blocking the screen.
Yeah.
All right, so.
Looks good to us, so.
Oh, good. That's all that counts.
Yeah.
So what I wanted to do tonight, and as Tom said, I'll do it very quickly, and I can answer questions offline too. So we want to talk about potential impacts. With respect to impacts, we really have to separate a couple of things. We have to separate the economic impact on residences, and then we have the economic impact with respect to businesses. And those are analyzed separately, if you will. And then there's also some information on the amount of spending in the community that's being impacted by really people staying at home and working from home. We also want to talk about the successes of that, some of the help that's out there. Local lenders have been working their tails off trying to get the Paycheck Protection programs out. So I want to go through some of that. And then we definitely want to talk about the path to reopening, because that is the key to economic success in the near term. So what I thought I'd do is give you a sense of the unemployment rate, because that's the typical thing that we look at. So this blue line is really showing you from 1990 through March 2020, what the unemployment rate, actually this is not the rate, this is the number of unemployed people in Scarborough. And you can see the biggest peak that we had was during the Great Recession. That was November 2009. So it's been steadily going down. March 2020, we won't see the impact of the unemployment filings that everybody's been talking about. We won't see that until the April numbers, and those won't be available until May. But what I have done, which unfortunately now I can't see because there's still a blob in there, but what I did is look at the statewide filings. If the statewide filings were applied to the town of Scarborough, you can look at the number, which I can't actually say. I think it's something like 1,600.
Karen, do you want me to take over, and then I can do that.
Well, no, that's all right, because okay. I don't think I can. I think there's a screen that's it says advanced sharing option. No, I'll muddle through.
Okay.
Anyway, so I want to emphasize these are what the state has been giving information on are initial filings. Initial filings are not equal to the unemployed. Because initial filings, some of those are going to get rejected. Some of those, aren't going to be part of the unemployment record. So there's a lot of things in there, but I thought it was important to take a look at of a labor force of about 11,000 people, which is the number of employed in Scarborough. Right now, we've got about 270 unemployed. Highest we've ever been is about 700. And if everyone, or a good portion of that wave of people who have applied for their initial unemployment filings go through, our unemployment rate is going to go up. And it's going to go up by really a lot of people. Now, some of those people are going to go back to work under the Paycheck Protection Program. Some of those people are going to go back to work, fortunately, as we start to open things. But again, we just wanted to give a sense. Right now, 270 folks, peak 700. Our peak is going to be higher than that, more than likely in April. And then I wanted to talk about the other side of the equation, which is jobs in Scarborough. And so remember, only 32% of the labor force actually works in Scarborough. So a lot of these jobs that we're talking about are jobs that are taken by other folks. Just as a lot of the jobs that our folks work at, the residents of Scarborough, they work in Portland. So we need to keep track of what Portland is doing because that's where a lot of our people are going to work. So if Portland's not opening and functioning well, that really affects our resident employment. Anyway, so we've got about 16,000 jobs. We've got another 1,300 or so that are self-employed. And if we applied some of those losses that the state is saying by industry, we might really come up with about 1,700 jobs lost. Now, mind you, some of that is going to get picked up because we have employers right now who are looking for people. Abbott is looking for about 100 folks right now. Hannaford is looking for folks all over in their stores. So there's a lot of people who are actually looking for employment or for workers. And so the last piece of sort of direct impact that we want to talk about is this idea of workers spending when they're at work. And so we did come up with some national studies that looked at how much does an average office worker spend during the week in their community. And that's about almost $200. Within Scarborough, about 20%, 24%, somewhere in there is the estimate of office workers in Scarborough. And that's just under 4,000. So on a weekly basis, if 50% of our office workers are home, there's about $300,000 that's not being spent in the local economy. So let's talk about help for businesses. We've been talking about the Paycheck Protection Program. That's the program that we've been pushing people to get into that. And the reason is because the majority of that is going to be a loan. It helps people either keep their employees or rehire their employees. And so far, been in 17,000 employers who have actually received, this is in Maine, have actually received paycheck protection loans. I don't.
Karen, can I ask a real quick question?
Yeah.
On that PPP program, because I got it. It's a grant, I think is what you meant to say. It will be a grant if you use it correctly. Yeah, I just want to point that out.
Thank you. That's it. That's what makes that program different is about 75% of it can be turned into a grant and you don't have to pay it back. And that's why, and in fact, that's why we want to push as many people into that as possible before we push them into all of the other loan resources that are out there. And there's the Economic Injury Disaster Funds. FAME has some programs. That's where they also have the consumer loan program. And GPCOG is repurposing some of their loan program to be loaned out regionally. Scarborough is obviously part of that loan program. And what we're hoping is that that is a good piece that can be used for really doing some retrofitting on businesses. Let's talk about SEDCO just for a second, because I want to make sure you know some of the things that we're doing. We did create, in partnership with the Scarborough Chamber, we call it the Business Update Scarborough, the BUS. We've got a Facebook page where we were pushing out all the information about really the consumer facing businesses so that people would know who's open, who's doing what. We've got 127 retailers, restaurants, and public facing businesses that are on that page, and you can see what their hours are. You can see who's open, who's closed. I took a microcosm of that and looked at restaurants. So we've got about 33 restaurants. All but 5 of them right now are actually doing business. They're open. They're either doing the curbside pickup or all manner of delivery and that type of thing. But most of our restaurants are open and doing business. Certainly not at the level that they were doing business before, but they are open. We do this, we call it the BUS Weekly. And so we've done one of those a week for the last 4 weeks. It's really pushing out the information on these programs. It's pushing everything out from an application so that you can see what you're going to be asked to do, as well as we went through all of our lenders and pulled out their applications and put through very specific websites where people can go directly to each lender's program, particularly for the Paycheck Protection Program. We're sending that out to about 900 businesses, a little bit more in the distribution, but about 900 of those are businesses. The SEDCO website is a repository for the information. So you can go there, it's static, but you can see what's going on. We have tried to retain office hours so that anybody can show up and just open the Zoom meeting, and I'm there to answer questions, to talk one-on-one, or to talk in a group. And some of those sessions have been devoted to guests. Paul and Tom were there. We had a great session with the construction industry. Tomorrow, we're having a session with the industrial real estate folks, since that's a huge market for us. So we have had some featured speakers. And obviously, we have been doing one-on-one discussions with folks. I have talked to a lot of the independent contractors and the folks who don't know where to start. And, we can't get them through to the, we can't have a magic line into the unemployment office, but we can listen to what they're having trouble with, and we can certainly tell them that they're not alone, and or where we can give them some one-on-one counseling on some of those options. We do have some problem areas. This lack of a path for the self-employed and the contract workers, we believe is finally getting addressed on Friday, and that'll be the first day that they can apply. And that's really called the Pandemic Unemployment Assistance for Uninsured Workers. I don't know what that spells. The second round of funding for the PPP was out on Monday, starting at 10 a.m. It may not be enough, but those people who missed out on the first round, we sent them a note last week saying, get your materials ready so that you can be ready to go. Seasonal businesses have had a particularly challenging time because the Paycheck Protection Program really made them look at a different time period than what their peak is. And my understanding is that some of that has been fixed. So we're hoping that they'll have some better results with that. And then access to lenders. The lenders are doing their absolute best to get to everybody, but almost every lender did require you to be a customer of their bank in order to move forward. And so some folks, weren't in a position to take advantage of that.
Aaron, if I could, on the theme of help, it may not be specific to business, but I'd be remiss not to mention Scarborough Helps and
Yes.
Project Grace. There's been some really great local efforts, folks, existing organizations, individuals coming together to really try to meet the need where it is. So do avail yourself of those resources if you need them.
Right, absolutely, absolutely. And then the path to reopening is just so critical to us really helping our small businesses. That's key right now. So time for planning is now. We've said that last week. We've been working with some folks on ideas for really creating some help around retrofitting businesses. There's a company that's ready to help other businesses. I don't think they want to be advertised at this point, but they really are thinking about trying to lend designers and really doing a SWAT team-like approach to help businesses maybe do some retrofitting. And people need to be clear that they should be thinking about not just a few weeks, but they need to restructure and think through a year. What do they need to do? And then one of the key pieces that we really think is absolutely important about this, it doesn't do us any good unless we can get people out of their houses. We need to do some public messaging to convince people to leave their home, that it's safe. We don't want to do it prematurely, but I do think some public messaging is going to be very important. And Maine residents are going to have to be the first tourists. We need to get our Maine residents out and about in the state at the appropriate times. And then we need to be thinking about, all of us have annual meetings and events that probably aren't going to take place in the way that they have been done before. But these are some huge, situations for a lot of our local event places like Black Point Inn, all of these other places that normally host these annual meetings. They may be missing out, and we need to figure out alternative ways to hold the events that perhaps can keep some of these locations whole. And we're certainly thinking about that. And we've been working with our neighboring communities as well. I think this public messaging and looking at retrofitting the businesses, that's something that we've been in talks with Portland, South Portland, Westbrook, and South Portland. And we're very focused on trying to do that. And then my last screen was, I did lay out the governor's Stay Safer at Home program for everyone, but we did already go through that. So I don't think we need to dwell on that. I will say, I think it was more expansive than I was expecting. So I think there are some good things in here. And I think we're going to be ready to go as soon as possible. All right. I talked fast. How long was that? Huh.
You have a question?
Yeah, Councilor Johnson, hold on one second. Let me have her stop presenting the screen and we can ask questions. Just because I can't see anybody right now. So
right. Okay. Hold on.
Actually, I'll do it. I booted you. There you go.
Thank you.
Councilor Johnson, do you have a question?
Yes. Karen, I was wondering, are you tracking the folks that are coming in for the HR 748, the forbearance assistance?
I am not. I'm not.
I think that would be an interesting, and I'm asking that only because I work for a large bank.
Yep.
Yeah, we are so backed up. For those that don't know, that's for small businesses come in and can ask for a forbearance. That's protected by the COVID Relief Act. It's HR 748, where they are actually charged no interest, no delinquency, no hit to their credit, and they push everything to the back. And that can actually go up to a year. So that may not necessarily be the restaurant itself, which might be filing for PPP, but of the owner of the building, because they're the ones that are paying the town the taxes.
So that I would think would be an interesting stat if you can find that in your conversations with the folks. And one other item I wanted to mention or ask you was in all your unemployment, and I know that's a lagging indicator, are you factoring in all these compensation cuts that are happening locally, IDEX, LL Bean, Unum, 10, 20, 30%
Right.
cuts?
No, we've only looked at the initial unemployment filings at this point, and we're really just trying to apply previous stats to them. We don't have a lot of the detail. That's what we're trying to work through with folks and trying to get that type of information in.
Well, because that might help us in trying to determine the tolerance of the tax, some kind of tax approach this year.
Yeah.
You may still be employed, but you may be employed at 70% of your normal compensation, which
Sure.
I know there are thousands of people in that situation in the Portland area. So,
Yeah.
all right, thank you.
Councilor Hamel and then Councilor Hayes.
Yeah, I just, it's a lot of stuff that's come out this afternoon. I want to thank Karen and everybody, Paul and the council for arranging this, a good discussion. But I haven't had a chance to read through the governor's guidelines yet, but first blush, I find it very troubling that it's going in phases. I also find it very troubling that it's very specific, very detailed down to different businesses. And, I run an Airbnb. My wife and I run an Airbnb. It reminds me of my grandparents during World War II, during rationing. They ran a grocery store in a small town. They decided to close it rather than deal with ration books and coupons and stuff like that. So that's my initial reaction. I would say, looking at that, I'm thinking, yeah, well, thanks for the effort, but I'm not really sure I want the government to give me advice on that. And I don't really, so I'll try to reserve formal judgment later, but I'd like to hear from other people. I know John Clucci's a business person, but that's my initial reaction. I got to tell you, not very good.
Councilor Hamel, as a side note, whatever adjustment you made, your audio and video is better than it ever has been. So I just
dumped that town provided Chromebook and everything's fine. So
okay. I just wanted to let you know as a heads up. Councilor Hayes and then Councilor Clucci. You're on mute, Peter.
Hey, Karen, just kind of a question. I know, some of those stats are sort of leading stats, but are you having any conversations in the community? What I'm concerned about is, are there distress? My wife offers, rents some small office space in the old Humpty Dumpty building. And in the last week, there's now 2 vacancies. There's tenants that have voided their lease and gotten out. I'm hearing, there was someone in town that said they've had significant number of clients that are trying to get out of leases that they have for office space. Are you starting to hear some of that we're starting to have vacancies, we're starting to have commercial lease property that are now going vacant? And to build on Councilor Johnson's, I did some work a while ago at BIW, and to that piece about the accelerator in the economies, every dollar that someone earns in a local economy, it generates $7 in economy around the community. So all of us that are sequestered at home, we go and we buy groceries at Hannaford, but we're not doing all the other things. I'm trying to get a handle on, as we look ahead, are we going to have distressed real estate values? I know some places around the country, housing sales have really slowed. Are you getting any sense of that this is really starting to impact housing sales, real estate, commercial lease values, all of those types of things that all will trigger our revenue flows?
So a couple of things in there. Let's deal with real estate first, and certainly Jean Marie can add in since she is the expert here. I think what we've seen is values on the housing side have not changed. They're continuing to go up. What is lower is the number of sales. Now, whether or not we begin to recover those sales in July, August, September, and we eventually, by the end of the year, end up somewhere around or close to where we would have, that's a question. I do think there's going to be some pent-up demand But it's the number of sales that have dramatically dropped. And Jean Maria, if you want to.
Yeah, I mean, we don't have the April numbers. We won't have those till the third week in May, as far as from the trade association, which is MAR. But yeah, anecdotally, the number of listings coming on are less, but that's because, think about this, if you don't absolutely have to sell your house right now, do you want someone from the general public trooping through your house with all the germs?
Right.
And people don't. I mean, I've got a few people who are waiting. They're waiting until they see something improve or the fear drops somewhat or whatever. So real estate is very much a supply and demand business, regardless of what's going on in the economy, so to speak. The less supply you've got, the more you're going to keep prices up. And there is pent up demand in the young professionals in particular, who have not, as of yet, been affected as far as their incomes. They're working from home, they're still making the same income or whatever, and they're still out there looking to buy.
Sure.
So, and that's for right now. Again, I don't have a crystal ball. As I tell my clients all the time, I don't have a crystal ball. I don't know what's going to happen in the future. But for now, it's not like 2008 when real estate caused the crash.
Right.
I mean, this is all unknown. But commercial, I'm not sure what's going on with commercial. I'll let Kim.
Yeah, that's the bigger issue.
Commercial. I haven't heard a significant number of people running out on their leases or are trying to drop their leases. I know a lot of people suspended the payment for last month, and I think we're going to start to see more of that, either some, renegotiation or, definitely I've had some calls about looking for cheaper space, but I haven't seen a dramatic change. But I think we're on that cusp of people trying to figure out what are they going to do, and certainly looking at rental space. And I think the working from home has also changed some people's minds about how much office space they really need.
Absolutely.
And I think that's going to ripple through from your 2-person office to your 2,000-person office in terms of the amount of space people need. And I think that is the key to what's going to happen in the commercial real estate market.
Yeah,
I would say, I'm sorry. I was just going to say cultural. We've got this huge cultural change, because I know there have been employers in the past who've been somewhat reluctant to let their people work from home. But I think they're finding out that maybe productivity isn't quite as high as it could be, because when you've got the kids home too, that makes a difference. But once the kids are able to go back to school, I personally, and this is just Jean Marie speaking, and anecdotally, again, what I'm hearing out there is there's going to be less brick and mortar. More people will be allowed to work from home. So there you go.
Councilor Clucci, did you still have your comment, or did you?
Yeah, I was just going to respond to Don or
Councilor Gleisten, you'll be after Clucci. Yeah, Clucci, go ahead then. Sorry.
Yeah, Don. So I don't run a Airbnb, but I run a motel, and the guidance is unclear right now. So potentially we'll be able to open in June for Maine residents, but how do you verify residency? I mean, you can't do that. It's discrimination. So, from my perspective, it's so much is unknown. I'm in a position where I need to invest to be able to open safely for my staff and customers. And I'm fairly confident that I can do that. Trying to find a Mister machine, a sanitizing sprayer, right? Those are scarce items right now. And we locked some down and we're able to get them. Plexiglass is a scarce item. But so it's just a really difficult time because you can't go from 0 to 100. Right. So July 1, you're going to try to flick the brakes on. Well, you got no staff. So how are you going to staff? And you got to have all the procedures in place, and you need to have some time to kind of work those procedures in so that you're doing them well when you do get busy. So that's the struggles that I've been going through. I will say our numbers for reservations in July and August have not come down. Those continue to go up. And we were fairly fully booked anyways, so we're not seeing a lot of cancellations there. Our May numbers are gone for the most part. We had hopes for Memorial Weekend, and the numbers had looked good there, but that will likely change now. June, I don't know. I need to actually read the order when it comes out, because the guidance is not clear to me what we may or may not be able to do, or what risk we may or may not want to take. I will say that we wouldn't open if we didn't think we could do so safely for our staffs and our customers. So that's always been our top priority. But I just wanted to respond, Don. It's confusing for me as well.
Great.
The visitor industry is clearly just significantly impacted. And I think most of you saw the numbers from Lynn Tillotson that she put out about the business, what she expects over the course of the next 4 months, and 90% down in May, and still down in July, August, September and October, still 30% down. So it's just, the tourism industry is devastated this summer.
Councilor Gleisteen?
It's great to hear from Councilor Colucci, because he's been really busy. So I've been able to hear some of his perspective, but that's just hugely, hugely helpful and informative. But one thing that Councilor Ken Johnson said, Karen, I don't know if we can get to this, but there's also forbearance for mortgage payments. Is there, and when I read that program and read how that was working, I was thinking, is that going to perhaps be indicative of people who can't pay their taxes as well? Not that we can make a direct line, but is there any way to get at those numbers, or is that just too confidential, nothing that we would have any kind of access to?
So I think it's probably, I'll ask, absolutely. I think it's probably highly confidential in terms of, who is doing it, but if there's enough of them, then they may be able to tell us. And I think each bank, it's the first thing we encourage everybody to do is call your bank, ask them first what they can do for you, and then talk about all the other programs. But there's a lot of people who have, I think the banks have been extremely progressive with folks and trying to help them out. The banks don't want people to fail. They really don't.
If I could just add something, because I've been talking to my clients have been calling me, my past clients, about the forbearance. And I will tell you, I haven't talked recently, but about 30 days ago, there were still some banks that were doing oh yeah, we'll give you forbearance for the 3 months, but we're going to add it all in and have a lump sum payment due, which I'm like, what the hell is that? Wells Fargo, my mortgage is with Wells Fargo. Wells Fargo is putting it at the end of the mortgage, which to me sounds more sensible. But again, as Karen said, people need to talk to their own lenders and find out what they're willing or able to do.
Councilor Johnson?
Yeah, I'm not an expert, but I'll tell you, all week, 60, 70 hours a week for the last 2 weeks, that's all we've been doing for TD is these forbearance loans. And just to give you just a little insight, you don't even have to give proof that you've been affected by this COVID. It's against the law. You call up and say, I need forbearance, you are automatically granted forbearance. There are no fees. They cannot ding your credit. And all they do is roll the principal to the back. There is no balloon payment or anything. That'd be a federal crime, believe me. But let me give you just another little insight. It may not impact us, but you know how we're all trying to encourage commercial growth, is that the underwriters right now in the commercial area are really looking at the assets very hard. Give an example. If you wanted to build a senior facility right now and go to a bank to get funding, wouldn't happen. If Joe Foley wanted right now to go borrow the money to build that gym, wouldn't happen. So this may be short term. We're kind of hoping it will be short term, but it may last for a while. So that's just, it's some insight, not saying that's doom and gloom, but they're definitely, they're looking at things a lot differently right now.
Karen, you had referenced our peak unemployment number of people unemployed in Scarborough. The
Mhm.
peak was 670.
Yep.
There are currently 1,600 applicants from Scarborough for unemployment. And I understand those are applicants.
Estimate.
I understand. I
Yeah.
completely understand. But is there some sort of industry standard or unemployment standard that typically 70% of those applied end up being on? I mean, there's got to be a way to, I mean, there's lots of historical data there. So
DOL was talking about at least a flat like 20%. And Don, I don't know if you heard differently on the call the other day in terms of the number of applications that fail, but they were talking about a 20% bottom threshold that usually fails.
gotcha. Okay. So I'm relatively confident saying that we're going to probably surpass that peak in 2008 just by some simple back of the napkin math. Unless, as you noted that there's so many PPPs that have kicked in, but okay. I just wanted to clear that up. Yep. Any other questions for Karen? No, Don, I'll add to what Councilor Clucci said. For instance, hair salons are open, but then it says cosmetology cannot happen for 3 months. Well, hair stylists are cosmetologists, so there is, but I think we have to realize that this is a press release, and I'm sure there's probably some nitty gritty that we all have to dive into. But just to your point and to Clucci's point, there's contradictions in the initial release, but hopefully, like anything, we'll iron those out. But Karen, thank you for your time. I don't know if you're sticking around or if you're dismissed. So,
could I just take one point, really to Councilor Gleisting's comments earlier? I hear a lot, and I'm concerned as well about the ability to pay, and I don't know of a good way to assess that feature. The one thing about property values, and that's our primary source of revenue, is that they lag quite a bit behind the curve, if you will. So, for instance, the values that will be affecting our tax rate for next year were set as of April 1st. And so largely, and I would say unaffected by this situation. And I might even suggest that even next April, we don't know what effect that might have. So, ironically, that kind of insulates us in the near term,
Right.
but it makes it more difficult to kind of estimate where this is all going.
I tried to get Nick to commit to something, and he's like, nope, we just don't know. So in terms of the tax assessor, so he's keenly aware of it, but he's like, too soon to tell.
So to that point about Nick and assessing and where we are in appraisals and that sort of thing, is there an opportunity for us to really take a look at this from a process standpoint and start getting creative about some sort of rolling system for doing appraisals that would be fair to people on both sides of the graph, the folks that maybe are overappraised and those that are underappraised. So I know this was a topic of discussion in the middle of the assessment that we did over the summer, but I think this is an example of a process change that might be very helpful for us to take a quick, hard look at and see if that might help us.
Councilor Clucci?
Yeah, so just something I want us to think about, kind of along the lines of what Councilor Johnson Sr. was saying with forbearance. So we're going to have 80%, probably 85% of our residents that can afford to pay their taxes, and will probably be happy to do so given the circumstances. But we're going to have another substantial portion of our population that won't be able to afford to pay their taxes. And is there a mechanism that might take some advocacy with the state government, with the governor or delegation? Is there a mechanism we can put in place to try to account for that, so that maybe we do have a forgiveness option for some of our taxpayers, and there's a funding mechanism that we can tap to help to cover that? So I don't know that the answer is yes, but I think it's a real problem that we're going to be facing this year, and it's there might be another way to try to help address it.
Yeah, we would need some constitutional changes. The property tax is cruel and unusual. Foreclosure is automatic. There's no forgiveness allowed. You don't have that ability. And so the only thing that we have, and this is fairly recent, is these assistance programs. And we've we have one locally directed at seniors. And we need some legislation to broaden that to go beyond and reach deeper into our community. So that's a conversation we ought to have with the delegation for sure.
You know, one of the themes that I'm hearing tonight is, you know, perhaps as a body, we should consider, I mean, people are, there have been some small call to actions on us, you know, and so what does that look like? How do we advocate for us? How do we advocate for Scarborough? So perhaps as a body, we should consider a resolution or something that that we can get support behind, because what I'm hearing from the delegation, what John just suggested, these are all the common theme there is that Scarborough needs to advocate for themselves. And the way that we do that is for us to agree on something as a body. So I think that perhaps something for us to think about behind the scenes, or to maybe somebody take up the mantle on that, on something that we could do as a body to push that advocacy forward. Because otherwise it's just us sitting around in a workshop, right? So. All right, Karen, I think that's it. We appreciate it. And I don't know if you're hanging out, but you're dismissed. If it's up to me, you're dismissed. I don't know if it is, but.
Stick around, Karen.
Yeah, they had to listen to me. I have to listen to them. It's only fair.
Next up, we have Jay. Jay, I'm going to make you the co-host here. So Jay, I believe you have a presentation for us as well. Is that correct?
Yeah, I have just a few slides to go through, and I will be try to be relatively quick. I think a couple of them. Let me see if I can do this. All right. Are you seeing my screen at this point?
We are. Yep. It's a little
you are.
small, so you might want to press present if you can. But
hang on one second.
there you go. Yep.
Is that presenting well on your end?
Looks great. Yep.
Great. All right. So let's see. So I was asked to really just talk about what our department is seeing. So I'm just going to run through sort of the actions or the what we're seeing in terms of development review from really the sort of the planning board side, ongoing construction, which I think sort of lends to some of this discussion about, you know, future values for the town. That's what current construction would bring. And then a little bit about what we're seeing on the more on the permitting side for future buildings for the coming months. So just briefly, you know, we're seeing right now planning board agendas are stable, very busy, quite frankly. The planning board spent 8 hours last week on Zoom in 2 meetings, getting through, I think, 14 out of 17 items, something to that effect. It was a very impressive effort by those folks. And our next agenda, which was just posted earlier today, has another, I can't quite recall the exact number, 9 to 12 items on it. 2 of those were held over from the prior meeting, but remain stable. And frankly, to date, I've only heard of one application that had submitted, had really gotten into the process, that withdrew, and it was an amendment to an existing site. One of our larger retailers decided to hold off until things cleared up in the future. So essentially the project developments that sort of went into the thinking around revenue projections remain stable from the conversations that we're having. And so I've listed a few of those here, and we can talk about those a little bit, but so far we're hearing things are still a go on those sort of larger initiatives. Can I change the page? Yes, I can. So this is a slide that was actually used in a presentation by our technical division last night, but just gives you a nice overview of what's happening currently in town. This is the new constructs that are underway or just about to be underway. And so you can see we're busy, about as busy as we've been in the last couple of years around this time. This is part of a presentation they do annually for our stormwater permitting process, but it certainly has applicability throughout. So you can see there's a host of items occurring in town. One of the things on my next slide here, and this is now, I'm reporting out information that I received from the Scarborough Downs team, M&R Holdings. Dan Bacon put together at the request of Councilor Johnson, to sort of an overview of what they're seeing. And really, I think what this does for me sort of echoes what we're seeing in our department so far, is that those projects that were already in the queue remain in the queue. And that they're, as you can see, particularly sort of down at the bottom of the page, those items that were in the planning stage, they continue to move forward with. And so I guess, I'll sort of let that information stand on its own, because I guess I don't want to speak for them, certainly, but the conversations that we've had so far have indicated that they're still feeling like things are going fairly well. So, and then my last slide, want to just touch on what we're seeing for permitting and revenues, and what's been happening throughout the year, and then what's happened in this most recent month, past 6 weeks. So as you can see here on the top, our permitting fees and inspections remain generally on target for this fiscal year. So you can see at what we've budgeted and where we're at in terms of actual. Actually, I was looking at this, we're about, oh shoot, I have the number. I think it was about $55,000 ahead of where we were this time last year. So we're exceeding what was occurring last year. And we are still seeing permits come in. Certainly, over the last 4 or 5 weeks, what have you, we've had a disruption in our normal office hours and staffing, but permits have continued to come in. So as you can see below, really we're about half as busy as we were maybe in terms of permitting and inspections from the prior year, maybe a little more than that, but it gives you an indication that there's still sort of that demand for things going on in town. We're still seeing those single family permits come in. A lot of people calling, asking us what we're how we're going to continue to proceed with inspections, and we've been able to get out in the field and keep those things going. So while it's slowed down, we think that demand is still out there, and so that's what we've seen just in the last month, and really that's the best data that we have to date. We should have, obviously this was through April 23rd, so pretty shortly we'll have our full month's report out in the next week or so. So that was really the information I had to provide, and I'm happy to share these slides with the council if it hasn't already been circulated. I'm not sure, but that's what I have for you tonight.
Thank you, Jay. I'm going to boot you from sharing. And Councilor Johnson, you have a question for Jay?
Well, I wanted to go back to a slide, but that's okay.
We can do that. We can do that.
Well, maybe we don't need to. Jay, help me understand this because I'm confused.
Okay.
A lot of the items you just spoke about have been in flight in the planning process over time before COVID happened. Is that correct?
Certainly on the current construction activity, yes.
So when you say there's permits coming forward, those are things that have already come through the planning board, already been approved, and everybody's been assigned their growth permits, right? Right. So can you speak to things that are brand new? And I'd like to see you address the WEX item, because I've not been communicated that WEX is coming. Are you privy to information that the council's not privy to?
I'm just responding to what I'm hearing from the Downs team that
Gotcha. Kind of says it all. Well,
I can offer some insight if that would be helpful.
Yes, could you please?
Yes,
actually, Tom, before, just to be really clear, the Downs had reported this specific stuff at my request. So when I had called Peter Mishu directly to ask specifically, could you give an update on the WEX outlook and on your economic activity? So there's no suggestion here that the Downs is feeding Jay any sort of information that I haven't heard directly. This was just simply my request. About 4 days ago, I reached out and asked for an overview of the activity.
Okay, and before Tom answers, let me qualify why I'm asking. I sat in on the SEDCO business review with Mr. Risbera and Jay. I've seen that presentation before, and I asked Rocky specifically, did they have a WEX lease in hand? And he stated no. Now, if that's changed, I'll wait for Tom's response on that. But if you understand what WEX's business model is, it's oil. And a month ago, oil was at $80 a barrel, and today it's trading at $2 a barrel in Texas. Okay. And the other reason why I asked was I specifically heard Mr. Risbera, that was representing the Innovation District, state that he had 2 contracts had pulled out because of COVID, and I did not see that in your presentation. So
no, and I think, and that's fair, and we can speculate the oil industry and WEX all we want, but I'm just, the tone of the question was to suggest, quote, that's all we need to know right there, as if there was some sort of communication going on that was not, that I wasn't privy to, and that's absolutely not the case. I asked to get a feel for the economic activity of the Downs, that's all. So,
and I just want it to be accurate and true, that's all. So if Tom's got an update on WEX, I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah, I've had 2 conversations that probably are relevant. One is with Peter Mishu, who confirmed the fact that they are proceeding with all the required infrastructure for the phase that will house WEX, which was certainly, it's a prerequisite for them to do anything.
Right.
In addition, they obviously are continuing to seek their approvals that are also prerequisites. More importantly, I had a lengthy conversation with Ben Devine. As you recall, Ben Devine is actually the developer in this case. As of last week, there is not a signed lease, but he believed it was imminent. And he spent a long time explaining to me the fundamentals that cause WEX to be interested in an office space of this size, and those fundamentals don't change. Oil is certainly one thing that they are involved, a big thing, but healthcare is another. The fact is they have staff in very temporary space, and even if that staff is reduced somewhat, there still is the need to house hundreds of folks in a space. The final piece I'll relate, and this is simply what Ben related to me, is that the final lease numbers that they have arrived at are very competitive with existing market lease rates. And so he still is spending money and is confident that this thing is going to proceed.
Counselor, actually, I'm sorry, Counselor Johnson, do you have any follow-ups? Sorry.
No, I still just a little confused. If I didn't know a little of what I knew by watching other presentations and would have just seen what was presented, WEX is going and innovation is going as scheduled, and I just heard contrary information. That's all. Just want to keep it above board.
Well, it strikes me before the CEA that I thought WEX was a done deal and the lease was already signed.
Right.
I'm kidding. That was what everybody thought. Mr. Hamill.
Building on that bad joke, I just have a comment. The comment is that it does seem to me in these times, you talked a lot about ambiguity. I mean, we couldn't get more ambiguous than the sort of stuff we've talked about tonight. We have new guidance from a governor. We're trying to bring the economy back. We have contracts that we've committed to that are still going, and we're not sure if they are or not, or whether we want them to or not. It does seem to me that whatever embers we have in our economy, that we want to blow on them and keep them going somehow, in a reasonable way. But at the same time, we're not going to let go of the concerns and the issues we have around growth. So that does lead to my question about, Tom, on CEAs. I know we're going to start to do calculations around CEAs, and people have not let go of WEX yet, whether that's going to ever happen or not. They've not let go of the commitment we made and the concern about paying, money to developers. That's going to have much more focus than ever. Can you give us an idea of what's going to hit us as things are coming, referencing the down CEA and, any others that may be in play?
Well, the CEAs in general, as you well know, no money's reimbursed until taxes are paid. Values created and taxes are paid. So that's the first. With respects to the WEX CEA, it doesn't start until they take occupancy. So there needs to be a physical building built. And forgive me, I don't remember the exact language, but my recollection is the CEA does a fair job of describing what our expectation is, a building of a certain size, of a certain value. If that's different, then I think we have opportunity to reapproach and reassess, frankly. But I think the fundamental key here is that no monies are reimbursed until they're paid, taxes are paid.
Thank you. I think it's gonna be helpful for us to reinforce that and to keep, steady as she goes with, riding through the middle here, as we're hearing from either side, that I know will be much more animated than normal.
Sure, good. Yeah, so we could
Councilor
characterize
Gleason, I
these
see
as,
you. You can be next.
we could characterize these as commitments, but they are commitments that require a fair amount of effort. They need to perform first. Let me put it that way.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Councilor Gleason?
Yeah, so that was actually, one of my concerns during the whole WEC CEA process was, if something changed and they didn't build the building that we based all the estimates on, for giving them, a flat fee. And so you're kind of addressing it now, but I'm wondering if you have heard that there may be a smaller building built. And, I could pull that agreement myself, but if we could get some assurance that if that does change, that we can revisit that agreement, that would certainly be at least help my mind, ease my mind just a little bit if they don't end up building the 45,000 square feet or whatever we based our estimate on. It's really, we did an average of 17.9% rebate over the 15 years, which was a lot more in the early years and less in the later years. So I better mute here because somebody's printing to my remote printer. Sorry about that.
If I might, I just want to reflect on sort of the comments that in regards to what my department's seeing in the Downs development are really about the conversations and the applications that come before us. So if there's conversations that the development team's having where projects may not be coming forward, those aren't necessarily the ones that we might have already seen. So the things that we've seen, the conversations we've started, I think it was just 2 weeks ago, the planning board approved the master plan for where for the property on which a portion of which WEX will be situated. So that's really what I'm reflecting on, is what we're seeing in our department. So, I guess just want to be clear that I'm trying to be as straightforward with the information that I have available to me. And, I think I've heard that there might be a future workshop that the council's thinking of having with the private sector, and that might be where you could get some of those deeper answers as to what's happening in the background that I'm not seeing. So.
Councilor Hamel?
Yeah, this is a kind of a process question, but before we forget, I'd like to just ask the presenters tonight and the folks that had slides, if we could just make those available to the council, and then we can get them on a website someplace for the public to look at them, would be very helpful. Thank you.
Yep, I believe Chair Johnson has my slides, I believe, and
I'll certainly take on that responsibility to make sure that's assembled and available.
Thanks, Tom.
Yeah, and just a quick comment, and certainly this is not a full read through, but I was reading the whereases on the CEA as some people were speaking. One of the whereases is that the facility intends to be 200,000 square feet, to speak to like a smaller building. I mean, I don't know if you can drive a truck through that language or not, but the CEA does outline in the beginning that the building intends to be 200,000 square feet. So.
Yeah, in my view, that would be certainly reason enough for us to look to re-engage.
Councilor Clucci?
Yeah, I'll just add, I was thinking about this the other day, that it would have been my expectation that they would have pulled out, but the fact that there's a CEA there may have actually made more economic sense for them to build a new building and locate their staff in one place rather than try to re-up on a bunch of existing leases. So, whether people agree with the CEA or not, I think there's a real incentive that may be taking place should they follow through and actually build the building. So.
Can I just make a quick logistical point to Councilor Hamels? I think it's helpful if the presentations are reposted back in the agenda. It's just like a place people go to look for stuff. So we don't since this is just sort of a really random workshop, it's, I mean, nothing we ever would have had in the history, you know, of, you know, it's a COVID, you know, so I'm not sure it has a good home spot, but it certainly has a good spot, you know, within the agenda of the workshop for people.
Yeah, apologies. Typically, we'd love to have this stuff available before
Oh,
we
no,
do.
no, no, not a criticism. No way. I don't expect, sometimes that can't be done, but I just mean it's even as a back thing.
I think the idea for this workshop came up late on Wednesday, a week ago, Paul and Don. Is that right? And we pulled this together in that short order?
Yeah.
Or was it 2 weeks? But at any rate.
Very good. Great idea. It was no way a criticism. I just meant it might be an easy place for people to find the information.
Karen, did you have something to add?
Well, I did just want to clarify, and Ken, help me out if I'm not characterizing this correctly. I do want to go back to you know, the likelihood of WEX really happening, and I think what was said in the meeting was the immediate answer to, had they signed their final contract with them? No, but their understanding was they had every intention of doing so. They had not heard any change at all with respect to WEX not wanting to move forward. So I just want to make sure that they had that perspective too, that those conversations were ongoing, but they had not at that point signed it. But you know, Ken is right; they've not signed it. But I believe the conversations have been positive and going forward.
Yeah, thank you for the clarification. I would just, when I saw WEX, just standalone WEX, I understand the infrastructure that's going to go on, that's going to be put in place. So I just saw WEX and
right. I you know, just wanted to make sure that there was a full conversation around that at the meeting that we had. So I just want to have a holistic perspective on that conversation.
Jay, to kind of circle back to Peter, I'll right after me, Peter, you go ahead. To circle back to Councilor Johnson's kind of original point, though.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of it is just pipeline projects. I mean, is there,
right?
You know, what is the evidence that it's the new stuff is coming online? And
so far, all I can reflect on again is what we're seeing. Our agendas have been full. As I said, our last agenda had 17 items on it or some such number, and this next one again has 9 to 12 items. So our agendas are as full as they've been. And so that's really the only data point I'm pulling from, that and the conversations that we're having with folks, that people are looking to meet with us. People are asking, you know, giving you my best shot at it here. To say that couldn't change tomorrow, I wouldn't say that, because it seems like every day has been a new dynamic. But so really, that's the data points you're getting right now, is from conversation, from email, and from those agendas. Beyond that, I'm not a forecaster.
Councilor Hayes, then Councilor Johnson, and Tom. You're on mute, Councilor Hayes.
Not to take us off track, but I do want to just say one thing, just moving back to the WEX and not having a signed contract. I just hope, you know, we're a learning organization. We learn from this. What I'm a little frustrated by, we are under a tremendous amount of pressure to make decisions because the lease was going to be signed momentarily and they needed to have answers. And here we are almost, you know, 6 weeks, 8 weeks out. So I really hope we take this as a learning that we need to follow our normal processes of things and not be leveraged and pressured into doing things quickly. Because I am a little frustrated that it's still not signed. And we were told that, you know, we had to have emergency meetings and everything else to get it done. So it's a pressure tactic to get us to make decisions, so that, for what it's worth. But I am most frustrated that it's not a signed lease at this point.
With all due respect, no one saw COVID either. I mean, I'm just going to throw that in there.
Well, this happened a lot, but that, I mean, when we made our decision, it was supposed to be signed. Anyway, it's just a.
I'll actually look at it the other way. I thought that the argument was they would come anyways with or without the CEA. And I thought that the fact
there were lots of different conversations, but.
Yeah, right. Because to me, this is evidence that they weren't coming with or without the CEA,
No. But more importantly, though, we got backed into a corner, and this is the same thing happened with the community center. So I think we just need to learn from this. And when these things come up, we need to take the time. We need to do it right. So what it's worth.
Councilor Johnson?
Yeah, just one last parting comment. Jay, I was not questioning you. I love you, guy. You do a great job. But to back to the, I went through the agendas because you had to have back to back, right? You were trying to do a cleanup. I don't recall seeing any new item on even the 2-day agenda. Now, I may be wrong. I've been following the planning pretty closely because I'm concerned about growth. So I just did not see any new item. They were different. They were the same group coming through, maybe in different phases of the planning process. So when I hear we're as busy as ever and our agenda proves that, we're sitting here trying to understand the impact of this virus on our community. That denotes to me that everything is fine. Matter of fact, there are people racing to come to Scarborough, and I really just don't feel that's the case. So if you could just clarify the agendas, not the one that's coming, but the last 2 nights of agendas, were there new items on there that were, you know, of substance, not somebody wanting to build a deck, but I mean, somebody that's coming in to build a development?
I would have to go back and look, to be quite honest. So, but I guess what my reflection on our agendas is typically items can take 2 or 3 meetings to get through. So I'd have to go look and see if there were the new items. I think some of the newer items are the ones we didn't get to potentially, but I would have to take a look back.
Okay, all right. Just again, just don't want you to think I was not challenging you. I
Hey, did you claim to be a forecaster there? I forgot.
I must have glitched out when I said I am not.
Oh, that's
I want you to be anyway, though.
Maybe in an effort to kind of wrap this piece up, I'll just observe that remarkably construction, you know, has not been affected in almost all respects. They have not missed a beat. I think there's been some interruption with, but in large part, it's remarkable through this last 5 weeks. You know, those are the folks you're seeing on the roads and going to our stores when the rest of us are at home.
Councilor Hamlin, oh, sorry.
So do we know how many new housing starts have happened then? I mean, how many housing units have, so I mean, I know we have permits that are coming, and then as Ken says, planning, but do we even have a way of seeing how many housing starts occurred since COVID?
Sure. Yeah, we can look at that. It's quite easy.
So I just wanted to, you know, as we're kind of rounding the horn here on this, one thing I've learned, you know, going back from the WEX experience and others, is that we really do need to plan worst case scenarios now, you know, and I know in both of those cases, we probably really didn't do that. And now guess what? We're not only have to, you know, model them, we got to deal with them real time. So that's to me a really big learning, you know, not a new Great Depression mindset, but I think I'm going to be looking at things differently now and make sure that we do that.
I guess, so do we think, so are we looking at, in retrospect, do we think that the WEX CEA, because I'm looking at it as it's as guaranteed as economic activity as we can get at this point. So
no, I'm not departing from my position on that. And
no, I'm just curious. I'm curious what people are thinking about it. That's
to respond to your question. We need kind of both. You know, we need deals like this, but we also need to be, you know, really get our back up. You know, get some steel in our backbone here as we move forward and really scrutinize these. I'm not suggesting we didn't in the past, but this is a reminder that, you know, worst case scenarios, there's a reason for them, you know, so.
Well, as the resident look at the worst case scenario person, yeah, I mean, I definitely had a concern that we guaranteed 150 and for the minimum and the maximum, because I thought the 150 was brilliant for the maximum to say, even if our property values go up, you know, there we are, we're going to cap it. So we never owe them more money. I did have a concern about the minimum on the front end because things happen. I no way thought a pandemic But, big corporations decide they're not going to build the same size building and all of that. So, I'm happy to hear Tom say he feels like the language lets us look at that again. And, I think whoever asked the question tonight, we need to get, I'm hoping we start meeting once a week and getting, having this type of conversation. I think it'll be helpful to the community. I think people want to see us talk. I think they want to talk. I think, we need to have some leadership out there. And I think it was Don that said, we've got to start talking about what these, who do we owe what? We're coming up, we know some CEAs are going to expire, but we have not still had the Downs presentation. And that is, it's coming up, and we're going to owe, a fair amount of money as in the CEA. It's not a rebate. It's not a tax credit or enhancement. It's the CEA. So, I think that we really need to start looking at those things. And, to Don's point, even that past council that did that, did they plan for a downside? Could that contract have had said something about, if the town revenues go down X, Y, Z, the percentage also goes down. It seems we didn't get protected on the downside, perhaps. I'm not making a blanket statement on that, but I totally agree with Council Hamel. Now is the time to learn from those things, and even modify what we might be able to modify going forward. So I was very happy to hear Tom say, if that's not a 200,000 square foot building, then there may be some things that could change for us.
Yeah, Betsy, I think those are really valid. I think, and to Betsy and Don's point, when we were going back to the down CA, to go the other side of the coin I was just playing is we did say, what happens if economic downturn results in a residential development, and then we couldn't get to phase 1, 2, 5, 6, and 7. So I just played devil advocate against Don with the WEX, but on the other side is that was a legitimate concern at the time, was we front loaded it with residential, and what happens when you front load it. And to that, real quick, I'll just say it publicly because I just want to everybody, we put that Downs presentation off just because of the situation. I think at this point, we are probably all comfortable enough to perhaps have this virtually. So I just welcome your feedback on, it is a 2-hour presentation from the Downs. It's pretty thorough. We were supposed to have it at the beginning of this month. Obviously, it got canceled because we didn't know our head from our feet. But if we're comfortable, if we're comfortable in this environment having it, then I would be completely okay with it. So just reach out to me and let us make a decision as a body. So Councilor Hayes, sorry for that. Go ahead.
No. Just, I just want to kind of build on what Don said. And I think it's really important. I think no matter what we did, I did the pro forma work in modeling for Hannaford's, when we did acquisitions. And I think what Don's referring to, and most businesses do, when you run these things, if you're looking out 30 years, and I remember saying a couple times, it's really hard to project what's going to happen over 30 years. We ran one scenario, basically, with assumptions in it. But what I think going forward we need to do, and it's a great learning, we should run and we've done this with our tax rates for a couple of years, run an optimistic one, run a cautious one, and then run what's the worst case. So you know what your boundaries are. I just think that's a good learning and probably a good practice that as we approach these things in the future, these types of things can and will happen in a 30-year span. So we just need to be more diligent at trying to anticipate what that might be.
Yeah. Councilor Clucci?
Yeah, I just wanted to add, there's an awful lot of hypotheticals and unknowns right now for what lies a couple of years ahead. But I, for one, am somewhat encouraged. I live near Piper Shores, and it sounds like they're starting to do some site work there. And I drive by where the Acura dealership is going to go, and it looks like they're doing some site work there. So those are some pretty significant developments that could help us in the near term, in the next year or two, or 3 when they start to come online. So that's positive that they're still moving forward. It's good news.
Yeah, and to add to that, the fact that we're finally whole on a yearly basis to Higas, I think, right, I think it's this year, Tom, or next year, we'll finally at least be break even on Higas Parkway. To me, that's a tremendous positive for budgeting purposes.
Sure. FY22, I think we come out there. On the issue of CEAs and our obligations, I believe we've done a better job than ever understanding what those obligations are and properly budgeting for them. So there's a sizable increase based on the fact that there's a sizable value that's been created. And so I just want you all to hopefully have some comfort that we've taken that into account and we believe that we're properly budgeted to meet all those commitments.
Anything else for Jay? Jay, could we ask, could you compose something for us like in another month or 2 weeks, just so we do, I would like an answer to the new activity question. I think like maybe a little more real-time data. I'm not suggesting you don't, but maybe just some quick up, I don't know, just maybe more nuanced, granular data as it comes in just in the next couple of weeks. I just think would be helpful. I mean, like literally just, hey, this many permits were pulled this week or what have you, because I do think Councilor Johnson's correct where, you know, you guys are getting through what you have to, as you should, you know, just what's behind it. That's all.
Yep. We actually do run a monthly report. So I can share that. We have it through March. And as I said, we'll have it through April, probably, you know, I can't remember when April 30th is, but I know it's just around the corner. I think it might be this week. So, you know, so yes, we can start to provide those monthly reports to you so you can see, and it shows, I'll provide it to you, see if it gives you what you're looking for, and we can certainly continue the conversation.
Yeah. And again, I know all this is readily available to us, but sometimes, you know, we're overwhelmed. So the fact that it gets dropped in our inbox is always helpful. So
understood.
Yeah. Okay, with that, I think
just the final point, if I could, Paul, this is one of those watch areas. You know, we're going to look at it carefully over the next 6, 7, 8 weeks before, you know, through the budget process. But right now we're budgeting kind of holding steady with from last year and a slight uptick, frankly. So it's an area that we need to be paying attention to, but I think there are some sizable projects that stand a very good chance of moving forward. But again, it's something that we need to be mindful of and make final adjustments as we know more.
Good. Thank you very much, Jay. Before we do the final agenda item, just because I know we're probably all running out of steam, I would like next Tuesday, I would like to throw out the suggestion that perhaps we do another 2-part workshop, 2-hour workshop. One for I like the private sector idea. I would like, but maybe just abridged for 1 hour, and then maybe the second hour actually just be some budget discussion. We do have first reading of a pretty unusual budget, so I'm just throwing it out there to. I agree that we should. Don?
Yeah, I think it's a great idea. I like the tone of this discussion. It was open and wide ranging, and I thought it was very respectful. We weren't afraid to ask tough questions and get it to issues that I think are top of mind for people in the community. So the more we do this, I think it's going to help us get better involvement and support for decisions and make better decisions. So I think
I have some concerns. Some of us are working full-time plus with this going on. I don't feel the need to be doing this every week at all. And we do have a town council meeting next week. So I would prefer to see it, if you're going to do it, then the next week, because I have a lot of work stuff I need to do in the evenings. That's just the way my schedule is. So just my input.
Well, I'm definitely for it. I think, you know, everybody's been trying to dig out of this hole. You know, Tom has had a million irons in the fire, probably still does. But you know, I think there's a lot of reasons to get together and talk. I think the hearing from some local folks would definitely be a plus. So I'm definitely for it.
Oh, were you talking before the council?
Everybody can make it. I mean, it's, you know, it's a workshop. There won't be votes.
I was talking about next Tuesday. I mean, we have first reading of the budget next Wednesday.
Yeah.
And we have a significant, we're going to have a first reading that there's going to be significant adjustments. And so either in real time at first reading, we're going to go back and forth, or I mean, to me, I felt it would be appropriate for us to process some of the significant adjustments in workshop format instead of being restrained by a typical council meeting formalities. Perhaps we'll know more after tomorrow, like after I know tomorrow's a big day for you guys, for all of us, excuse me, for the Joint Finance Committee and the big unveiling, so to speak. But I did watch the majority of the school presentation, and I believe I don't think we're going to be at 2% looking at what the school put forth. And I think it's probably best for us as a body to discuss that instead of having knee-jerk reactions at first reading when people might be making decisions at the spur of the moment over multi-million dollar decisions. So, and I understand that it's only first reading, but I think the severity of the situation deserves time. I mean, we're all working full time, Jean Marie. I promise you.
No, I know, but I'm just saying that right now I'm feeling like, whoa, my candle's burning at three ends. Plus, we've also got staff people,
Yeah.
whose time I want to be respectful of. And I thought tonight was great to a point, but I think we've gone now too long. And I think that if you can do it where it's much more, you hold to an agenda, and if you say you're going to do it 2 hours, do it in 2 hours. If you're going to say you're going to do an hour and a half, do an hour and a half, because quite frankly, this Zoom format is a real burnout for a lot of people too. And I know you know that, Paul, because you're on it
Yeah.
like I
No,
am.
that's fair.
Hey,
No, I agree.
You know, it's like, Jesus, after a while, forget it. Then things go downhill.
Councilor Glystein and then Councilor Johnson.
Yeah, thank you. I have to say, I have a huge concern. I guess we'll see what we see tomorrow night, but I have already been thinking about, crafting a communication, crafting an idea about, I'm a first reading and accepting the budget and starting the 60-day clock and seeing it for the first time and trying to put it all together with the BOE. It's a lot for me. I mean, I keep talking about the workshop today. One of the things the 3 town managers that presented today said, they are going to commit taxes at the absolute latest possible minute that they can and maintain cash flow and other things. And so I guess I'm still at the point where I'm not sure why we're going to start this, the 60-day clock. What I'd really like to see the presentation and then make a decision about when to start the clock, because and this is no cut on anyone, because I know Tom did a lot of work, but the last time we saw the presentation, we got the budget book, it's at 15 minutes after we started the meeting. I mean, and that was fine because it turned out to be a presentation. So we could hear the presentation, we could digest it later. I do have a major concern with getting a lot of information that night and having first read and starting the clock. So I'll just put that out there. I have a really big concern with that.
Well, let's wait till after tomorrow and see how everybody feels. Let's wait till after tomorrow. Tomorrow's a big day. We'll figure it out and we'll talk amongst ourselves. So, Councilor Johnson, I'll give you the last word, then we'll go back to the agenda. So I apologize for the derail.
Yeah, I agree. I guess we're going to decide later on it, but right after the Joint Finance Committee, there's going to a lot of things falling out. I did watch the BOE Finance Committee today, and I don't have high hopes. So I would like a day before we roll into Wednesday to digest everything. And I'm going to really ask Tom, anything you can pass us back in your rework of the 2%, or any other items you may be doing, if you can share that with us, the sooner the better.
So before we go to the last agenda tonight, it's been almost 3 hours. I know that there's been a lot of concern about the work share maneuver or the work share program. Do we as a body feel in a appropriate place to discuss this and get Tom's presentation, or would we like to put this off to the Joint Finance? It's almost 3 hours, and I know that this has been a topic of some concern for some people. So I just want to make sure we're going into this with the appropriate mindset. Mr. Hamill?
Yeah, I have been, very animated about this issue. So I probably would be the last guy to say table it, but I'd rather have us devote the time and energy, at a good time for all to do that, rather than to add it and keep going. I think it's a tough thing to pick up at this hour.
So if there's no objections, I would like to perhaps move this forward to the Joint Finance agenda tomorrow. Please feel free to push back on me, but I just, as Jean Marie has alluded to, this is the 3rd hour on Zoom and it's been a lot. And I know I just don't want to end this night on a note that wouldn't be productive, or we might not process this the way we should. Tom?
Yeah, I'm just because concerned somewhat about expectations for tomorrow night. I don't know what those are. I think Peter has had some conversations with his counterpart. Honestly, I don't know what the purpose of tomorrow night. It sounds as though you're all interested in seeing details. I don't know if that's what the school board's prepared to do. I think my hunch is, and I tuned in to see some of their conversation late this afternoon, I think there's going to be more conversation around how we allocate this next step as opposed to specifics. I mean, I will have done my work to have a good sense, but by the same token, at the starting point, we took a huge step already in that direction. And so I want to make sure that's appreciated and understood as part of, in the course of all this conversation.
So I sat in on that meeting as well this afternoon and had to drop off a little early before they wrapped. But, basically it was 6 slides showing various scenarios, not a lot of detail. And I had a hard time, and I'm reasonably fluent on this stuff. And I had a hard time figuring out what it all meant. So I kind of agree that I doubt, it's not going to be a substitute for detailed review, but I think it's really important to set expectations around what we're going to do for the process.
To give people an idea of the level of detail, I mean, I think I left after tier 4 or tier 3. I mean, they did say specifically this would be 2.5 positions at the high school. And, so there are that level of details. I don't know if we care if it's a math teacher versus a social studies teacher. I mean, I don't think that's really in our purview, nor do we necessarily want to go down that hole. But I agree, Don. I mean, it's an overview. It's an overview, but you do know in general where the adjustments are being made.
Well, did they give you a bottom line number? Because that's the only thing we're concerned with.
Yeah, there's several from what I don't want to, again, I left the meeting.
Right.
It's several different tiers. I think I got through tier 4.
So they're coming out with several different possibilities for numbers. Am I reading that? Well, it's real easy because we just say no to what we don't like and yes to what we do like, and they don't have much choice.
Agree.
We do that item Tuesday.
Councilor Hayes.
Yeah. Maybe it would help just to, as Tom had suggested, reframe what at least Sarah and I thought the purpose of the meeting was.
Thank you.
Because I'm now feeling like we're not going to deliver he's expecting. This really was a process by which in the past we have gotten together to start working through the budget conversation. And I will say, I did sit through the whole presentation. This is more work at this stage than they've ever done. And they've done it. I mean, we were pretty clear that they needed to come in at 2%. And J. Marie, yes, to answer your questions, they've got 4 tiers of things they can do, and they're all sort of accumulative. And there's a fair level of detail. I mean, they do talk about the positions and the investments. Their tier 4 basically comes in at 1.63%. So it comes in under the 2% for them, their request. So, they've given us a menu list of things that they've sort of pre-sorted, saying if we had our choices, these are the adjustments we'd make to get to this point. I think what we wanted to talk about was, Tom, for you, I think they wanted just a recap of tonight. What did we learn tonight? What was sort of the general conversation as a framework?
Sure.
I'm not going to speak for them. I think they kind of sense that this is the starting point, that the first read is the starting point. They know there's probably going to be additional things we're going to need to do. So we were going to talk a little bit, share where we are. Tom usually puts, from what Tom's numbers are and their numbers, we'll be able to arrive at what that mill rate increase might be. And then we were just going to talk about how do we move from on. So that was sort of the general theme of tomorrow night. So it wasn't going to be getting into the nitty gritty, but there's enough detail there to know. And at their last slide tier 4, I think there were 15 positions involved. So they're being somewhat circumspect about who and how. They kind of equally cut from all departments, but they've given us a vehicle that we can get close. So we thought the only thing tomorrow night was share that, talk about where we are, talk about likely what's going to happen and how do we want to move forward from here.
Peter, that was,
That's such a typical school board move, though. And it doesn't matter what school board it is, having been around this since 2000, whatever year I was first elected,
Yeah.
2013, is, they come in with, oh, well, if you make us do this, we're going to do that and the other thing. Well, in my opinion, that's their choice. And they're the ones that are going to have to pay the political price on it. If they choose to lay off a bunch of teachers or whatever the heck they're going to do, I think it's not the right way to do it, but I can't tell them how to do it. Our job is to get them to a bottom line number that makes sense for the citizens of the town of Scarborough when it comes to taxation. I mean, that's just where I come from with it.
No. Yeah, no, I understand. But I think, I've been doing this for 6 years too. And I will say, it's been the relationship, and this was sort of Sean and Chris's brainstorm or mission or trying to get us together to come to the table. It's gotten a little bit better each year. I think Tom can attest to this is probably, they've done some heavy lifting and they were stressed. I mean, they put a lot of heart and soul into where they got to. So I'm taking it as a positive sign. We're not all the way there, but I think they're coming to the table in good faith, and I'm curious to see where it goes. I mean, we got to get through this together, I think. So I agree at the end of the day.
I'm sorry, Peter.
We need to decide where we need to be, but what it's worth.
Peter, you said that a lot better than I did. So thank you for clearing all of that up. I totally agree with everything you just said. I think the level of detail for where it's at right now is completely appropriate. So it's not, we don't need a revised budget book from the school board. So thank you for saying that. I think it's best. Betsy, I'm going to give you last word and then I'm going to adjourn this workshop because I feel like we're going.
I thought the work they did was very helpful, especially looking at it from a non-school board member, as a member of the public, basically when it comes to their budget. And then we have our role, as Jean Marie explained. But there is one point I think, and they'll probably make it better tonight, that Sarah made, is that they haven't even had a chance as a board to go through it. This is the leadership staff has spent since we had the meeting, they have had many meetings, and they're weighing out all kinds of options of, if we cut this, what does that do? What is this? And they did the tiers. So they have put a lot into it. The BOE themselves have not had the opportunity. This was the first time that the finance committee saw it today. So I think it was a really good document. It was a really good, I don't even want to call it starting point, but it represented work like we've never seen before for these unprecedented times. And I really like what Peter laid out. I had not heard exactly what we were looking to accomplish tomorrow, but I think that's great. I think that sounds really good.
Well, Peter and Betsy, both of you, thank you for the positive on that, because you're absolutely correct. I think my lead in probably didn't do it justice. So Peter, thank you for adjusting those expectations. There has been, I can tell you that the staff has been on the school side, I know has put in countless hours, as Tom has. So with that, I think we're going to say, staff, thank you for all the time that you're putting in, staff on all ends. And and I think it's time for bed. So I'm going to adjourn the workshop.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And so to bed.
And it's time for bed.
Dinner time.
Don, that is a lot better. That computer is a lot better.
Thank you. Yeah, it's just, it was a different machine and a 5G connection.
You gotta take that other machine you've been using and don't use it for council business.
Is that's the town's Chromebook?
Yeah, it's the Acer. I don't know. It's a new unit too. I don't really know. I think that, I don't know. I mean, it's got plenty of memory. I don't really know. Or it could just be my fumbling with a Google.
Don, I might suggest, Google Chrome might be the difference, but just use that for the Zoom connection. Use your PC that you're comfortable with, your desktop, for your other business.
Yeah. Great. Thanks very much.
See, my town Chromebook has unicorn stickers on it and rainbows and all the YouTube, like it's all my daughter has my Chromebook. So.
Thank you. Hey, I thought it was a very productive meeting.
Good. All right, guys. Hey, Betsy, good luck tomorrow during joint finance. See you
Well,
guys.
it really helped seeing their presentation today, and I kind of knew about it, but your email definitely gave me the push to go, yeah, I need to log on to
Yeah.
that, because I was finishing up with the MMA one, and I'm like, nope, it's worth, it's going to be solid 2 o'clock MMA to whatever time the workshop, but it was well worth listening into.
No, they did a good job. I was a little confused on the found revenue, with I think they're, so.
Yeah, I didn't understand 100% of it, but I appreciated the tiers, and I think the public, once they understand it, will also appreciate the tiers.
My sense is Kate has calculated savings